What's happening, everybody? Hi, welcome to the program. It's the Jeff Gerstmann Show for... He looks at the corner of his screen. November 26th, 2024. I'm your host for this week's installment. My name is Jeff Gerstmann. I am typing onto the internet. It is podcast now, and then a URL that people can click on if they want to enjoy the podcast live. It's a twitch.tv URL, and I am pushing a button, and I am pushing it, and I'm hitting the share now button on this multi-platform social media sharer, and there you have it. Now the world, now the Fediverse knows that this podcast is happening. I've gotten onto the Fediverse and federated a message out in two separate ways. Two separate Fediverse instances are now aware that this show is live. It is the week of Thanksgiving here in the United States of America. The Fediverse. It sounds like the Fediverse. It just sounds like you're talking to the feds, which would not shock me if the Fediverse ended up being just it's an op, man. It's all an op, man. Did you see this story going around about Niantic and Pokemon Go? It was like the head of there was an executive changeover, and the head of Niantic was kind of on record about saying hey, all these years of Ingress and Pokemon Go and all this other stuff, we've built this really detailed data map of people walking around the entire world and playing our games, and we've ingested tons and tons of data about that, which it's conceivable that some military might want to buy that from us, and it could be some kind of AI thing. It's conceivable, and then was like, but if it contributed to a war, we would have to really stop. We'd have to. It's just like this, oh, okay. I mean, you're still you're still collecting it. This has been like a story that comes and goes in various waves for years. Wait a minute, Pokemon Go is taking in a lot of location data, like every, let's call it 24 to 36 months. Someone writes a story somewhere going, this seems a little off, and then people go, whoa, you're right, and and then it kind of goes away. Every time this happens, I feel crazy, because Niantic, the company behind Pokemon Go, there's a guy, his name is Gilman Louie, and Gilman Louie was not the founder, but the chairman of Spectrum Holobyte, the company that put out Tetris on they're in Tetris Forever, kind of talking more recently about that stuff, but also Falcon, the flight simulator, Falcon 4.0, and the big pamphlet, the big binder full of docs for that flight sim. And what else? What else did Spectrum Holobyte do? They did Star Trek: The Next Generation for SNES. They thought about publishing that soccer kid, Marco's whatever soccer thing. They thought about publishing the SNES version of that in the United States. I once collected a paycheck for a focus group type thing for the Next Generation, the Star Trek game, from Spectrum Holobyte. Glenn Rubenstein, who is my partner in the Game Boys to Men podcast, worked for Spectrum for a while. Anyway, Gilman Louie, who was who was running that company for years, went on to basically have a really long defense contractor type of career. He post Spectrum Holobyte, I guess, got into national security and has had a career doing that, including running a venture capital fund for the CIA. Literally, the CIA funding companies out there for, for that. Guess who was on the board of Niantic? And may still be. I was not able to find a good long list of who is currently on the board at Niantic. But it's your boy Gilman Louie. And so, like, from the start, Niantic had a weird, but maybe it's nothing. There's no smoking gun to any of this, but enough things that you look at it and go, but yeah, that dude had a hand in Niantic and was, and perhaps still is, on their board of directors. And so whenever these stories come up about, like, man, the Pokemon Go stuff seems like it really could be some shit. Like, sure does. And so I don't really know what to make of any of that, other than every time this comes up, I mention that yet again and go like, hey, by the way, there is a weird, like, loose but still present CIA tie to the company that made Pokemon Go and Ingress, and they did the other. What is the other one? The Pikmin game wasn't them, was it? No, I guess. Anyway, they did one other game. They did was it a basketball? They do like an NBA game where you had to walk around and shoot hoops or something. Anyway, they did that Harry Potter game. That's what it was. Close enough. NBA, Harry Potter. Practically the same thing. So yeah, it's just like it's just one of those weird things. And yeah, hey, maybe it's nothing. But when people talk about Pokemon Go in the context of, like, boy, you sure have collected years and years and years of data of individual people walking around and, figuring out, hey, what's a walkable path? And, they would often frame it as like, well, yeah, maybe we could do like Street View, like really good walking maps for the cities of this great nation, or whatever. But, having this story come up and be like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe the government would want, maybe a government would want some of this stuff. Maybe it'd be bad if it was for war, but, like, not outright saying, like, we'd have to think about it if it was for war stuff. Guys, it's always for war stuff. Even if there isn't something actively happening, once you have the data, you have the data. And what happens if someone hacks that data out of them and takes it and does something without even licensing it from them? That's even worse. I don't know. Anyway, I don't mean to, I like it. It's always, talking about this stuff, you always feel like you're 2 clicks away from, like, sounding like a straight up lunatic. And like, this is without, and by the, and they're getting the data of Pikachu walking in. Doug Trio is a Doug Trio is making kids gay, whatever it is. But literally the factual case here is that there was a guy on the board of that company that had that has presumably a security clearance and has been involved in national security type of positions for a good long time. And so, like, the dotted line is right there. It's all right there. You don't need a cork board and things to, connect these dots. It's all right there. So yeah, I don't know. Do with that what you will. That's just, man. Here we are. It's just about Thanksgiving, and yeah, it's been a very very trying year around these parts on the family health front. We've had some family members that have that are not doing well and stuff like that. So we're kind of coming to this end of the year stuff, and it's like a reminder of, like, yeah, this stuff is. This is rough. This is rough stuff, and it's been starting to, as I start to think about the games of the year and start to think about the kind of the year that's been, it starts to sink in about, like, man, it has been a very fucking tough year around these parts. And I will. There's there's details I will get into on the podcast in a later date about some of this stuff, because I became infuriated at a company of people that are pretending to be nurses and doctors that are I'll get into it in greater detail, but there's a lot of very shady shit out there. There are a lot of very shady people out there that are in the like end of life business, and it's fucking infuriating. And I'll have more to say on that on the other side of some stuff, but yeah, it's been a fucking disaster of a year on certain fronts for sure. Speaking of which, Stalker 2 came out. No, there's no good segue there. But hey, speaking of things that aren't working the way that they maybe should, Stalker 2 is out. There's really, I ended up playing a few hours of it last week, and the game has not been patched since then. I ended up writing. I wrote about the review process for Stalker 2 because it's one of the weirdest ones I've ever seen, and I started talking about it on like Blue Sky or something, and there were people there that were like not really understanding what I was getting at. They were like, well, it sounds like that's working as intended, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, no, fucking idiot. And so I ended up writing out something that was a little more detailed. That's up on the Patreon. That's a free post if you want to take a look at it. You can sign up for free, and there are some posts there that are, kind of flagged that way. Or, of course, obviously, there are multiple tiers. You can support the show, get an ad-free podcast, bonus content of multiple types. And you can find out more about that at patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann. But I wrote about the situation around reviews of Stalker 2 because there's really, it's kind of a no-win situation. Games come in hot all the time. Games launch rough all the time. It's, these sorts of things. These sorts of things happen, but it is messier and weirder, and the way that they sent it out was also not great. A lot of times, and this is something that happens these days when games go out for review, because the idea of a game going gold it means nothing anymore. And they announced that Stalker 2 went gold like a few weeks ago, and I'm just like, what does that even mean? What does that mean? It means you're manufacturing discs. Are they manufacturing discs? Did they make a physical version? But in a world where, games are going, our digital sales are increasingly the way that people get games. The idea of we've burned a gold master copy of this disc and now we can send it off for manufacturing. Like, who cares? It's like it's a meaningless milestone for players at this point. And and so, of course, and this is, and who cares? Ultimately, the situation here is like a lot of the stuff that reviewers saw in the week prior to the release of the game are things that you will never see because a lot of it got fixed. But unfortunately, a lot of it didn't get fixed. And the thing that they sent out when they sent out copies of the game was like a note that came with it that was like, hey, we're aware of any critical bugs you see, we're going to be fixing them. And any minor ones, we're going to fix a lot of those as well, without actually detailing what any of those issues were. At this point, the normal thing to do when you're sending out a rough review build is you say, here's our list of known issues. So if you encounter something like that, just know that we know that it's here and we're working on it. And as a reviewer, you kind of still have to take that with a grain of salt, because what if they don't get to it? What if they break something else? Like, it puts you in this position where, you're if you encounter those bugs, like, you're almost encouraged by like, well, they know about it, so it'll be fixed. But like, you can never take a publisher's word at face value when it comes to stuff like this, because not because they're lying to you, but because a lot of things can happen over the course of that review period, and maybe something else comes up and they just don't get to this bug that they said they were going to, or whatever. And so at the end of the day, it puts you in this position where you're like, well, I don't know what the public is going to see at this point. And this goes back, I encountered stuff like this with like the first BioShock on Xbox 360, where the version that people reviewed was not the same as the version that people got in their hands. And it puts you in a position where like it leads to reviews that are all over the place, because some people maybe take that at face value and go like, well, they acknowledge these bugs, so I'm not going to waste my time getting into them, even if I saw them in my review period or not. Some reviewers must do that. I don't know why. Or other situations where you're writing about the bugs you experienced, but because the game is getting patched right up until the moment of release, though other players might go, and then you end up with like the angry review fanboy guy who's like, well, I played it and I didn't see any of this. Like, good, dumbass. Like, what the fuck? You know, like, hey, yes, awesome, great. Like, that's not, like, that doesn't, you know, especially in the world of PC games, you know, shipping games are going to be all over the place for different people because there's going to be various incompatibilities. We have a story where like the current version of Windows is incompatible with several Ubisoft games this week, which is interesting. And so like, you know, social media being a fucking cesspool as it is, you know, you anytime you write about any kind of technical thing at all, you always get like weird, and it always comes across as this like angry, like weird thing where people are like, well, it works for me. Like, cool, fuck off. Like, what is that? That's not okay. It's broken here. It's not like, oh, I guess fuck me then. It's just it's a completely useless conversation to have. So they sent this out without a bug list and just said like, we're aware. Anything you encounter, we know about it, which is can never be true. And then like a couple hours before the game went live and before reviews hit, they sent another email that was like, it was like a list of, here's all the bugs we fixed. And it was like, we fixed 111 crash bugs. We fixed this many. And sure enough, like a lot of the bugs that I encountered in my time with the game, many of them had been fixed. You know, the game has not crashed on me since it came out. I know that plenty of people out there have had crash bugs in the PC version of the game. And so it is still all over the place, even on the other side of these patches. And so you have this situation where like, okay, you've got a 40-ish hour game. They patched the game for the final time. So the version that you're playing now became available to reviewers about 24 hours before the game went live for everyone. So prior to that, you know, the game had been patched 3 or 4 separate times, which again is not unheard of in the world of reviewing video games these days. But, you know, you've got a game that is longer than 24 hours to finish, and your shipping version was not available until 24 hours before the game was available. And so there's just kind of no way to have a review ready at the embargo time that is actually fully accounting for the shipping version of the game. And so you have a situation where some people might be talking about bugs that are not in the game anymore. There were situations over the course of that week where, as they were patching it, new problems were showing up. Like, I didn't have any performance issues at all with the game until about the middle of the week, and then suddenly it stopped running well at all, and it was just like, well, this is fucked now. What the fuck, you know? Not how this is supposed to go, but you know, it's a very anyway, I wrote a lot about it because it is a complicated situation, and I ended up kind of going through a lot of the history of this sort of stuff with reviews and how going gold used to mean something. And at the end of the day, it's kind of a big whatever. You know, the conclusion, not to spoil what I wrote, but you know, at the end of the day, you know, it's a bunch of bugs that you probably won't see. And a bunch of bugs that you will see because they're out there now apologizing and saying that they're supposed to have a patch this week that's fixing some stuff, and they're acknowledging other things that they're not going to fix. Someone wrote in who is affiliated with this video game, wrote in anonymously, and just, you know, it just sounds like every part of this game has been tough to make, tough to work on. The situation under which they made it created a situation that made it hard to promote it. There's a lot of weird stuff happening at every turn with the development of this game. I think the thing that is probably the least helpful, the attitude that is probably the least helpful in this situation is you've got people that are just like, that's Stalker, baby, and like, fuck off. Like, no, like I get it that sometimes bugs can be funny. And sometimes bugs can lead to situations where you're like having a good time with the experience, but like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, grow up. Like, I don't know what the situation, what to say to that other than just like, dude, you should want more out of your games. Like to be like, that sounds just like the first Stalker. Like, that game came out a very long time ago. Also, this is a game that has like significantly more backing in terms of marketing and whatever else, through Microsoft's involvement in it. And there's just a lot of weird. It's a not ideal situation for anyone involved: the people making the game, the people marketing the game, the people reviewing the game, and the people playing the game. Every step in this process is compromised in some weird way, because of various circumstances, and then that makes it interesting in a lot of ways. As for the game itself, which is the long-winded way to say, I don't think the game's very good. I really but whether it's the gunplay, the voice acting, the quest structure and dialogue, and there's some of that is related to bugs where it's like, this map, and some of it is related to like, some of it you don't know if it's a bug or if it's just designed poorly or if you're doing something wrong. Because it leads to a situation where you're just like, I feel like the map should work in this way and it's not working in this way. Am I screwing this up? Is the map broken? Is there something messed up here? And so kind of across the board, you just have a situation that the game is, I would say unacceptably rough, but I feel like even the parts where you're playing it and it feels like it's working, I feel it's just a very underwhelming experience. I feel like standards have changed a lot for, when we think about open world first person games. Obviously, there's been a lot of those between Stalkers. And for this game to come out and kind of just like still be this to a certain extent and still have, some of the rough edges, that don't necessarily make it a better game, don't necessarily make it a more realistic or hardcore game. I think that stuff is a shame. And I think that this game could be a whole lot better, and could have a much wider appeal to a much wider range of people, if they had done a few things to it that I don't think would sacrifice the experience for people that like the older games. Though I don't know, the whatever, the reactions to the game are very mixed. You see some people that are like that purport to be diehard Stalker fans that now think that the game is overly shallow and stuff like that. They went and consoleized my Stalker, which they did. They very much did. Because that's the market now. I mean, that's they're not out there trying to make some weird game off to the side. They're making one of Microsoft's marquee Game Pass launches for the year. And it's a, that's just the way of things, kind of whether you like it or not. And I think they're right to shoot for that, but I don't think that they nailed it. I don't think that this game is ready for prime time. It feels like something that they should have just delayed again. And then you start to wonder, like, why did they have to ship it here? Is it because Microsoft needed it in this window between Call of Duty and Indiana Jones? Is it, what's the other stuff happening, that made this game ship in this state in the first place? And it could just be, I remember we shipped website stuff that was clearly not ready. Or rather, it had bugs in it still, but because you only have so many people that can QA your game, and if they've been QAing that game for years and years and years, you're out of fresh eyes. You're out of sets of fresh eyes at that point that can find new bugs. They've been staring at this thing for so long, they're just like, I don't know anymore. And so at some point you need to find sets of fresh eyes, or you just need to ship it and go like, they'll find them. They'll find them fast. You want to find the rest of these bugs in this game? Ship it. Everyone, they will find everything within a week. And then we'll know what to do or whatever. But yeah, kind of just a very strange situation. Like refreshing in a weird way to have something so nuts still happen out there in shipping video games and reviewing video games and whatever else. But yeah, I don't know. Like I'm telling myself, like I'm gonna wait and see. Propaganda asks which one was worse, this or Redfall. I think this is worse than Redfall. I think from a like technical perspective, this is worse than Redfall. You could argue that like the highs of Stalker 2 could potentially be higher than the highs of Redfall. Like from a which game would you rather play perspective, like I would probably still say Stalker 2, just because of the the nature of it and the style of game that it is compared to the style of game that Redfall is. But in terms of like actual glitches and actual problems and the size and scope of those issues, Stalker is way crazier. Like Redfall is a victim of like it's not designed well, or like there are aspects of that game that you just go like, this is just not a very good game. And the technical parts of it that were messed up were not that, I don't know, like playing Redfall, the parts that were broken about it felt like parts where they deliberately made a choice. It felt like they deliberately made choices that made it a bad game. It didn't feel like technical glitches of like, oh, there's potential here, but it's, but the frame rate, this and that, and there's weird stuff like that around the situation that the Stalker 2 is much worse from just a playability technical aspect stuff. Whereas again, Redfall, and whether it's changes they made late in the game because they realized they needed to ship Redfall, and so they're just like, whatever, man, make the co-op like this, but still they felt like deliberate choices with Redfall that were just like, oh, this is just a bad game. And some of it is against some of the things they promised, or some of the things they talked about the game having. But the problem with Redfall is that it had like co-op that felt like it fell out of this Borderlands 1 era, pre-Borderlands era of like what drop-in, drop-out co-op could be and how that stuff would work. Like Redfall just felt old. Redfall felt like it had not been adapted to modern standards for a cooperative game in this day and age, and the problems kind of fell out of it from there. But again, a lot of them felt like deliberate choices or undercooked situations, not wild glitches and crash bugs and whatever else, right? Like, Stalker is a completely different situation. And so it's kind of weird to compare the two, but like if you're comparing like which one is worse from like a technical, soundness, Stalker 2 by a mile. That doesn't mean Redfall is a better video game. Even if they were both working to their fullest, I'd like nah. Redfall's biggest problem is that it's just not a very good game. The part where it ran at 30 on console, like it's easy to look back now and go like, whatever. Like Redfall's issues were so much greater than like, it doesn't run at 60 on a Xbox. And like, yeah, that's a bummer. That's not gonna, you double the frame rate in this. It's not gonna make me want to play it anymore. But okay. Of course, in some ways, both of these games are dwarfed by Microsoft Flight Simulator, which they miscalculated everything they could possibly miscalculate with it, I guess. That game is an 11 gig download. We talked about this like a while back before launch. We were talking about some of the stuff that around AI voice cloning that they were showing people pre-release that I guess is not in the final game. Makes me wonder if they'll ship it later, or if it was just an experiment that they walked away from, or whatever. But instead of like, hey, you need to download this like 400 gig game or whatever, like they did last time out, or configure your experience. That's what it's like. Select your experience, and you can decide how much of it you want to download, and they changed it over time too with the last one, and how that stuff worked. Instead, they're like, let's do a small game client, and we will just stream assets to you as needed. And their servers could not withstand that. And so you have a ton of players, and it's for Flight Simulator, a game that, when it settles, it will have a dedicated player base. It will not be a massive, massive player base, but at launch, you have more people that want to see this thing. I don't care about Flight Simulator as a going concern, but here at launch, I very much want to see it. I want to see what they did with it. I want to fly around a little bit and see like the visual fidelity. And I want to crash a plane into a building. I want to do the Flight Simulator stuff. But I'm not the actual audience for that game. And so I assume it must be a situation where there are a ton of people in that boat where they're just like, oh, I have Game Pass, I can play Flight Simulator, cool, I would love to mess with it. Like, I'm going to very quickly discover that this game is not for me, but I'm sure gonna try it a couple of times and go, wow, and then never touch it again. And so in that window of people wanting to touch it for a little while, their servers are massively overloaded, and they did not plan for that, I guess. And there was some number, they're like, oh, we only planned for 200,000 people to be playing this game. Yeah, well, there are a lot of people on Game Pass, and they may all want to take a look at it. And there are even more people on Game Pass, presumably because of the launch of Call of Duty. So yeah, that's one of those weird oversight things. It's hard to launch an online game in the best of circumstances, and launching this big streaming asset video game in a way that you did not do last time out, and you're accounting for subscribers that don't have to actually pay money for it. So you don't really have a good way to know how many people are going to be there day one, because you can't look at pre-order numbers because it's a Game Pass game. And so they could maybe look at like pre-installs or pre-saves or whatever they do on Xbox when they say like, install it now. And you're like, okay, you've downloaded a 100K file to my Xbox. Like, and you'll update it later, I guess. Great. Did they not do a beta test? So yeah, yes, they tested the game with people multiple times. Or like, yes, people played Flight Simulator prior to release, but how many people were in that test? How many people were in these sessions? 100, 200? How many people did they get playing it at a time? They never did a big full-on stress test, and that you wouldn't see the capacity issues until you actually launch and actually feel the crushing weight of all of these people trying to play your game. It's a good problem to have, right? Except for the part where, no one gets to play the game. Eventually this will sort itself out and no one will care. Especially the Flight Simulator audience, they can be patient, I'm sure. It's been a long time for them that they've even had, more than one of these games to play at a time anyway, with their DCS and, well, I guess that's not true. And DCS and some of the other stuff that's out there, but I don't know. It's more and more people have been getting into Flight Simulator as we get further away from that launch date, and people like lose interest or whatever. And the people that are dedicated to playing Flight Simulator are not going to be swayed. They're not going to go like, well, now I'm not going to play it. It's like, well, all right, go back to playing the old one or DCS or whatever else you're into, and just skip a Flight Simulator. Can you afford to skip any Flight Simulators in a world where there are so few of them? The answer is no. They're a captive audience. They're stuck no matter what. Star Wars Outlaws came to Steam. And with it, the DLC launched. I did not touch the DLC. It's Lando Calrissian themed. You gotta, he's in there somewhere. And along with this came another patch, and it's. I'm really torn on this conceptually. So the thing they finally did the thing that they said they were going to do when they were talking about, like, boy, this game did not sell as well as we thought it was going to. We're going to take out a bunch of the forced stealth stuff, especially from the early game. Yikes. Because they felt that was being a blocker that was preventing people from playing more of the game. And And so I need to get in here and really mess with this and see what they've changed, because so a lot of the kind of early game forced, and by forced stealth, I mean they create a situation where when you get caught, you kind of put up your hands to go like, yeah, you got me. And it just says caught on the screen in big letters. And you get teleported outside of this area, you know, outside of the kind of whatever faction you're trying to infiltrate. You get teleported outside of their part of town. And you get to sneak in again. It is not super difficult. It is not hard to, I did not find anything very hard about this aspect of the game. And a lot of that forced stealth stuff is up front, and it kind of dissipates later on because you're out in the world later on. I think it makes perfect storyline sense for like, dude, you can't start a gunfight in town. I think that's something that I just look at and go like, yeah, you can't start a gunfight in town. You're not going to pull out your blaster and start smoking everyone around you because this entire city is patrolled by fucking stormtroopers. Like, it's going to go bad for you. Like you would just get smoked. So like you going like, yeah, okay, cost me some faction rep and boot me out of here. It makes sense. And so the thing I want to do that I haven't had time to go do yet is just go shoot everyone in town and see what the fuck happens, because they wouldn't even let you pull the gun out in town. And so the idea that you can shoot your way out of these scenarios feels very, and maybe I'll feel different about it after I get in there and try it, but just like conceptually feels wrong for the character, feels wrong for the situation. And it just feels wrong across the board, that you can fight your way out of those early game kind of in town moments, and that's weird. But I have been continuing to kind of chip away at that game a little bit here and there. I have to stop for a little. Well, I don't know if I have to stop or not. We'll see. We'll see. We'll get into it in the news. Because there's another situation impacting that poor game. That game is still, I think, one of the best games I've played this year, even through all the trials and tribulations it's been through in terms of just like good big budget game. Like it's super fun. I have been having a really good time with it. But man, these people cannot catch a break. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe people are just tired of Star Wars. And it's just the wrong year for a Star Wars game anyway, but whatever it is. I've been setting up Steam family stuff. I created a Steam account for my wife because she did not have one. And she wants to play Dragon Age. She's always been a big Dragon Age fan, and I, it's just we're always so busy with with the kids and everything. So we'll see how much she gets into it. But she wants to try to play Dragon Age, and it put me in the situation where I'm like, well, shit, how am I going to actually do this? And it's like, well, and I have two PlayStation 5s now because I have a Pro, so I could take the other PlayStation 5, hook it up to some TV, another TV in the house, and she could play it there. Like, what am I gonna do? And the master bedroom does not have a television in it, and so that's not an option. But also there's a baby sleeping in that room, so it's not a good room to, especially at night, to have a TV on. When the baby eventually moves out of that room, that'll be a much more normal. I think everything will be a little bit more normal when we. It's been a long 5 years. So anyway, it turns out I also have two Steam Decks. And so what I did last night is I pulled out my original kind of launch Steam Deck and put that account on it and created her an account and did all the Steam family stuff. Steam, the new-ish, they beta tested it for a while. It rolled out widely relatively soon, recently. The Steam family stuff has the potential to be really great because it lets you share your library with other people. And I don't know what the limits are for this in terms of do they want everyone to be on the same IP address on a regular basis, or like what do they consider a family? I know when they first were testing it, they were like, yeah, we're the definition of family. We're really kind of thinking with that through and what that like. They didn't really have a good definition of that at the time. So I'm not really sure. Someone in chat is saying that it's people just need to be in the same country, which is interesting. Anyway, when you add someone to your Steam family, they get access to your entire library. Now, they've done library sharing before this. And the way that library sharing worked before this was terrible. Because it was a situation where like you could share your library with someone else. And it was a situation where you could share it on an individual computer, or you could share it with another account. And when you shared it with another account, if they were playing any game from your library, you could not play a game. You would have to kick them off in order to play a game. And so it was a very limiting setup, because you would go look and you're like, oh, I'm going to sit down and play a game. You're like, oh, this person is playing a game for my library. And you're like, well, fuck them. And you would launch a game, and then they would start getting notifications saying like, we're kicking you out of this game in 3 minutes or whatever, because so-and-so launched a game. And so that was never an ideal situation. With what they've got now, basically everyone in the family contributes their games into a pool, and you can play the games. So in this situation, let's Dragon Age as an example. If my wife is playing Dragon Age on this Steam Deck, I can still sit down here and play whatever except for Dragon Age, because Dragon Age is in use. If we had both purchased Dragon Age, then there would be 2 copies of Dragon Age in the pool. So if we had a family of like 5 people or whatever, 2 of those people could be playing Dragon Age at any time before hitting the limit and saying like, oh, well, now we can't play any more Dragon Age. It's a much better, friendlier setup. And I think it seems outstanding right now. Like as someone who, I looked at it, I researched it a little bit when they first started beta testing it, and was like, this seems like it's got potential to be really cool. And then now that I'm like going through the process of setting it up and kind of getting my eyes on how this will work, it's rad, because you can actually share games with people. Like you think about the Nintendo Switch or just consoles in general, how they do this is it creates a situation where you're like, okay, I'm going to make my primary console not the one that I use. I'm going to make my primary console the one that my wife uses, because then she can play all my games. And then the console that I use is not my primary console, meaning it has to be logged in online for me to play any game at all. And it's this weirdly backwards scenario, same as on Switch, same as on everything else. If like I have a Switch Lite that the kids use, and originally it was my wife's Switch that she doesn't use anymore. And it's a situation where like, so they're technically playing on my wife's account, and it has its own separate saves and whatever. And it can play all the games because I made that my primary Switch, meaning the Switch that I have hooked up to this television will have to be logged in and online in order for it to work at all. The Steam stuff feels like a much better realized version of that concept that does away with this like primary device bullshit and whatever else. It's just like, what games do you own? Yes, other people can use them because you've opted them into this family. Nintendo even has a concept of a family for the kind of their online accounts. You can buy a family pack of those, which you shouldn't have to do. You should just be able to buy one of those and just have people in your household be able to use it on the devices to which you are anyway. So the Steam family stuff seems great. And hearing that it is limited to the just the country makes me wonder. I've got a nephew who's in another state who is the only, quite literally, the only relative I know that plays games on Steam. And now I'm like, I wonder if maybe I could add him to this. And and then he would have access to a bunch of stuff as well. And then I'm like, I wonder if he would have access to the. You can designate whether a person is an adult or a child when you add them. And so now that I'm thinking this through, I'm like, I wonder if he would be able to see all the weird porno games that are on my Steam account. I bet if you added them as a child, that would probably handle it. And yes, I also don't know how any of this works with unreleased video games, which I frequently have on my Steam account. I don't. But the thing is I guess developers can kind of opt out of this and say we don't want our games to be. We do not want our games to be part of this procedure. I don't know what the process is on that, but there are some games that are just going to be incompatible with it conceptually, because you'll have games that are tied to external logins, like your Call of Duty account or your EA account or your Ubisoft account or your Rock. The people, is there still a? I know the 2K launcher just went away, so that's one fewer dumb thing in people's lives. But basically there are some games that simply are not part of the program, for whatever reason, because they're a-holes or because their games are just straight up incompatible because of the way license keys are distributed from the Steam profile to the account level to this to that that it creates a situation where some of those things simply would not work. I'm sure it's a bit of both, right? There are definitely some that are, that way because of technical limitations. And there are probably some where developers are like, heck no. You want to play this game, buy your own copy. Which I think is a really backwards way to look at it, because I think this is something that if this picks up steam, if this is something that people get into, that I think it could be something that, between the Steam Deck and between, like, they're building this ecosystem out in ways that I think will help people, that will help build a preference, not just for Steam games in general, but this could help PC gaming become more palatable to a wider range of users. And I wonder if it will have any meaningful impact here. But like this Steam family stuff seems very slick. And the Steam Deck itself is like, as I'm setting up this account and realizing, like, I'm going to hand it to someone who has only really ever played games on consoles. Is this ready for Prime? Is this like something that I can hand to her and go like, here you go? I think so. The problem is that there's going to be some games that are not fully Steam Deck verified, right? So I was like, what other games would my wife maybe want to play on this thing? And so I installed Blood Rain 1 and 2, which are available on Steam. Or I don't know if they're still available. Anyway, I have them in my Steam library. And as I was installing them, they had the little pop-ups that you get on a Steam Deck that's like, hey, there are parts of this game where you're going to need to pull up the keyboard and use it for text input, or hey, there's going to be situations here where this game's not going to work the way you think it should, or whatever. And as I'm looking at it, I'm like, yeah, I wonder if that would be a deal breaker. At most it's a text message to me saying like, hey, I'm stuck. What the hell's going on? And then I say, I don't know, hold down Steam and push the X button to bring up the on-screen keyboard, and then do this, and then do. Is Sudeki on Steam? It was. I think it is. I believe the PC version of Sudeki is on Steam. I don't know if that's Steam Deck verified, but that would be a funny. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I'll take a look. Any Leisure Suit Larry games? Those are the games my wife likes. Blood Rain, Leisure Suit Larry, but only the new ones. Or the new one that was on Xbox. Sudeki. The Dragon Age franchise. And I guess Final Fantasy X. that's the list as far as and that era of Mortal Kombat game, the Xbox PS2 era of Mortal Kombat. So I'll see what I can get on there. And then I could maybe install. she likes Donkey Kong Country. So I could always install some of that stuff too. Throw an SD card back in there. I don't have one in there currently. All these Black Friday sales. Are you buying anything? Have you bought anything? I bought a toothbrush because my toothbrush was I have had the same electric toothbrush. I mean, you change the heads out, obviously, but I've had the same toothbrush for like 20 years or something, I think. And so I was finally like, yeah, this thing is all fucked up. I should buy a replacement one of those. And so I ordered one of those. I feel like I always, every time there's any one of these weird, like a bunch of bullshit is on sale, things, I find myself buying like yet another micro SD card. I'm always in a situation where like I could use one more micro SD card. And so every time that stuff's on sale, I go like, ooh, I could buy another terabyte micro SD. Except last time they did this, where is this thing? Now I can't find it, and that's almost worse. Last time everything was on sale, I bought a 1.5 terabyte micro SD card. And then promptly lost it, and then I found it recently, and now I don't know where it is again. Because that's how much I needed a micro SD card. I didn't need to put it in I didn't need to put it in anything. Or rather, I was originally like, I'm going to put this in my Steam Deck. And then I realized like, oh, I'll have to clone the SD card, or I can't just copy files over. What do I, because this is Linux, and what do I got to do it? And before too long, I was like, this all sounds like a pain in the ass. So I haven't actually thrown it into anything, but that is eventually going to go in my Steam Deck. And if I can find it, I swear it was on this desk, man. Oh, it's still in its packaging. Anyway, it's around here somewhere. Or like big hard drives. But I just recently bought. Well, I ended up buying an external and an internal 24 terabyte hard drive. Not that long ago, because in the process of moving machines around and whatever else, like it became clear that I needed something like that in my life. And then I realized like, oh, this external hard drive situation sucks because it powers down, and it's just it was a terrible fucking terrible purchase. And so I shucked it. I yanked the drive out of it and threw it into the TerraMaster DAS 6-bay thing that I bought recently for the server out in the garage, and added another 24 terabytes to that. So it's like I got two. It's like that thing where you buy a 6-bay device that can hold 6 discs, and there's only 4 in there, and you're like, yeah, I could throw 2 more hard drives in that thing. I could get another 48 terabytes, but the prices are not good enough right now for me to want to do that. So I'm definitely not going to go spend another. It'd be like another. They're like $400 a piece right now, which is too much. Which is too much. I got some for that price recently because I desperately needed one because I had a failing drive and had to like emergency. I basically had to replace the server in the garage with a totally different computer and do all this other stuff. And so it was like one of those scenarios where you're like, none of this is as cheap as it should be, but I absolutely have to do this right now. And so I need this stuff here tomorrow, basically, so that I can do all this work. But yeah, some of the 20 terabyte drives are more reasonably priced. If kind of never. Usually, you never want to buy the largest hard drive you can, because that's where they get you on the prices. And I have not seen any great deals on any of that stuff right now. So I don't know, man. It's like every time there's a Steam sale, you buy a little bit less because you have all of the stuff that goes on sale all the time already. I feel that way about everything at this point. But it depends on what you're looking for. There's always some, like I needed a toothbrush, and that was very useful for that. And I bought a case of Hawaiian Punch energy drinks that I'm very excited. I think those are showing up today. But the rest of this stuff, I'm looking at the deals in games, and I'm not seeing anything that makes me say, wow, man, this is a great time. Like, the consoles are cheaper. Like you can get a slim PS5 for I think it's like $60 or $70 off. And there's just a handful of deals like that they're like decent if you're looking for a new console or whatever. But like and it's pretty the PlayStation VR 2 has been discounted to something like $350 or something, which is, I think, a pretty good price for that thing, but also a very telling price for that thing of like, hey, please buy these, please get these out of here. Like, we're not doing anything with them. And the process of hooking them up to a PC and using them there, which is what you would want to do, is ridiculous as well. But like, what was it? It's the bundle. It was the bundle. So the PSVR 2 was originally $600, and now it is $350. And so that's a pretty solid price. The PSVR 2 itself. Well, so I guess it's the same price whether you get the bundle or not. So you might as well get the bundle. But yes, when they launched the PSVR 2, it was $550. And the bundle was $600, and so them selling that for like $350, that's a pretty good price cut for that thing. Except that it's still a PSVR 2, so I don't know. Ultimately, I like, what are you going to do with it? Like, you would have to be already excited about the lineup that's there, because I don't think you can count on a great deal of additional software launching for that thing ever. Bartman in the chat asks, are they selling Batman for it yet, or will they? So no, probably not. That Facebook funded that game. Facebook made that Batman game, I believe. And so I doubt that I believe that will be a Quest exclusive. And there's probably no reason for them to put it on PlayStation VR. So like, that was the only one that I looked at the price and said like, oh shit, hey, that's actually like that's almost half off or whatever. But it's not. It's you could hook it up to a PC, but you lose a lot of the unique and interesting features that made the PlayStation VR 2 cool in the first place. And so it's a reduced experience on top of that. And so like at that point, like, you would almost be better off just getting, well, I don't know. I was going to say, would you be better off getting a Quest 2 or something? Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. It's a funky bit of math that I don't feel like doing right now. Let's get into the news. It's the end of an era. Coming soon to an Xbox near you. Microsoft has confirmed. They didn't necessarily go out of their way to shout this from the mountaintops, but they have updated a support page to say that they're going to remove avatars from the Xbox One and Xbox Series X. This support will end January 9th of 2025. That's soon. If you want to see what the bottom of an avatar's foot looks like, well, presumably you'll have to hook up an Xbox 360 to see that, I suppose. They're citing the reason cited is low engagement, which makes sense. In the fact they posted, why will the Xbox Avatar Editor app no longer be available? Microsoft is dedicated to delivering great experiences for players, including a variety of options to personalize their gaming experience with Xbox. Due to low engagement and our shift in focus towards delivering other player experiences, the Xbox Avatar Editor app will no longer be available starting on January 9th. Players can still personalize their gaming experience with dynamic backgrounds and profile colors on Xbox consoles, and with Xbox original avatars, profile themes, and gamer pics on Xbox consoles and PCs. For more info on new features and updates, visit news.xbox.com. What about all my previous Xbox avatar purchases? If you purchased anything for your avatar from November 1st, 2023 up until January 9th, that will be refunded. Any avatar purchases you made prior to November 2023, you can kind of get bent on, I guess. No one remembers that this existed in the first place, and I occasionally see the avatar that I hastily like created in like 2 minutes for the current Xbox, and it's garbage, and they all look like garbage. They look different than the Xbox 360 avatars. It's like they tried to stretch them out and make them look ever so slightly more realistic, and they look like shit. Say what you will about the Xbox 360 avatars, those were not like amazing and great. But these ones I felt looked significantly worse, and they never made a big deal about them existing. You can see them if you go look at like the gamer score leaderboard for your friends list. That is a place where if any of your friends have customized avatars, they'll show up there. That's really the only time I ever see them. And they were not really used for anything else in the modern Xbox era, the current Xbox era, meaning Xbox One forward, because that's all kind of a contiguous life cycle or whatever. Now, they are not doing away with this on the Xbox 360. All of this stuff will remain there, which is arguably the only place where it ever mattered, because there they were making games that supported the avatars. They sold a lot more avatar goods in that era. So your Wu-Tang mask that you bought in 2004, perhaps, may still work on the Xbox 360. And a lot of the other junk there will still be in place for a couple of reasons. One, because they're not touching the Xbox 360 anymore. They're not going to go out of their way to remove that stuff. But yes, Kinect Joyride, Fire Pro Wrestling. Was there a Bomberman game that had it? Did they do a Bomberman avatar game? I forget. The avatar stuff on Xbox 360 was not great, but it was like used better and used more directly than anything that happened on the Xbox One forward. Yeah, 1 versus 100 is kind of one of the more classic examples of that. And so none of that is changing. So, realistically, if you want to see the bottom of an avatar's foot, and the Kinect will make it possible. You could still hook all that stuff up and see it, and still have your ODST pod drop in behind you, or whatever all the other your RCXD from Call of Duty. You can drive it around, and all the other little animations and stuff that they did for that on 360. So I think this is a positive change. The avatar stuff on the current Xbox was poorly implemented, and every time you happened upon it, you're just digging through menus going like, what's even here? And you're like, wait a minute, avatar stuff is still here? What the fuck are they doing? What is an Xbox anyway? And it was always a very strange thing to uncover. And so they're right to remove it, and I hope that they I hope that they do more with the dashboard, and just like you can just upload your own images now. And I was trying to, this was recently, this was like a couple of weeks ago. I'm like, well, it's time for me to update my Xbox gamer picture, and I want to update it to the Pringles Man logo, because I'm trying to duplicate the experience of having an Xbox 360. And I found the Pringles logo, and I had to do it on my phone because that was the only place I could upload it. It didn't look like you could upload it from a web browser. So I found the Pringles logo. I downloaded it to my phone's photo library. I opened the Xbox app. I went and change avatar or change picture, uploaded the Pringles picture, and then it wouldn't let me crop it at all. So if you go look at my Xbox gamer picture now, it's just like the lower right corner of the Pringles logo. What I want to do is I want to find the picture of Ving Rhames from the Mission Impossible gamer pictures that they sold, or maybe they gave those away, back on the Xbox 360. What I wanted to do is make is look like Ving Rhames. Don't we all, man? Ving Rhames, right? Handsome fucking guy. But I could not find that exact picture, and uploading other pictures of Ving Rhames felt like it was just wrong. So, so I need to find the actual Ving Rhames photo used for the gamer pictures. Probably have to, if I dug an Xbox 360 out and hooked it up, I could do it that way. But yes, the process for uploading a new picture for your Xbox account feels undercooked a little bit on the Xbox app on your phone. But hopefully we will get there. The PlayStation Portal often felt like a joke of a device. People who got them liked them. People who bought a PlayStation Portal seemed to really enjoy it. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess it must fit a specific use case. I always looked at it as like, man, I got a bunch of other devices that can do this and do way more. Why would they even ship this? This doesn't even connect to any of their cloud stuff. What the fuck are they doing over there? Well, they have decided to update the PlayStation Portal to support actual cloud streaming. They're saying here for select PS5 games on Game Catalog. So it's not a scenario where you can play anything that you own, which is the move they're starting to finally make on Xbox. But they are updating it. They say this update will also include, well, it's a firmware update that is available now. It says speaker audio output adjustment to make volume lower when the audio is set to minimum, and adjusting settings of your volume, other volume stuff. This update will also include a beta version of a new feature that many fans have been asking for: support for cloud streaming on PS Portal. When the update is live, PlayStation Plus Premium members will be able to participate in a beta for cloud streaming on Portal, allowing select PS5 games in the PlayStation Plus game catalog to be streamed directly from our servers, even without a PS5 console. This is still an experimental offering. The features available during the beta period may change over time and may not reflect the final experience. That seems much more useful and much more interesting. I still look at it and go like, this is all stuff I could do on my phone, and certainly a Steam Deck, if you're willing to jump through a couple of hoops here. But that's a great feature for them to add to the PlayStation Portal. I think if you're already about that Portal lifestyle of streaming games from your PS5, being able to stream them from the cloud without having to turn on PS5, it makes that device more useful. It probably makes that device something, I assume it works this way, that now you could more easily take it away from your home and use it in a hotel or other kind of Wi-Fi environment or whatever. And so that ends up making it a much more useful device than it was previously. I still don't know that this fits into any part of my life and the way that I play games. But it certainly, makes it a much more interesting device overall. To stream at 720p requires 7 megabits per second. To stream at 1080 requires 13 megabits per second. And they say some features are not included in the beta, such as game trials, streaming games purchased on the PlayStation Store, system features such as party voice chat and game invites, the create button, 3D audio, and in-game commerce. And you can only do PS5 games. PS4 and PS3 games are not supported. I wonder why. I wonder, because you can stream those games onto a PlayStation 5. I don't I wonder what the limitation is. It's a beta. They're probably just testing stuff out. But I wonder what the limit. Why would it be any different than streaming on any other device for them to go like, well, this is a beta and yeah, we're going to have some limitations. And it's kind of a weird thing, but maybe there's just something that I'm overlooking about it. In other handheld PlayStation news, Bloomberg is reporting that PlayStation is in the quote early stages of making a portable PlayStation, a PlayStation Portable, if you will. Specifically a PS5 thing is what this is kind of framed as kind of the yeah, well, I don't, there's not a lot of detail to this, but basically the idea is, hey, what if they made a portable PlayStation that maybe would play PS5 games to a certain degree? And I think that's interesting. This is, again, like one of those situations that I look at. It's the same conversation we've had about the Xbox handheld. And it is that very idea of like, man, if I'm going to buy a handheld, I'm going to buy the one that is capable of playing the most games possible. And that is not a system that is going to be locked into the PlayStation ecosystem or the Xbox ecosystem. That's going to be a PC. And maybe that's not a Steam Deck. Maybe that's, whatever the upcoming, if they refresh the Asus ROG Ally X or whatever at some point down the line, and you have a more powerful version of that, or whatever. Like, there's just, that doesn't sound immediately interesting. Of like, hey, but the other thing I'll say is, from a worldwide market perspective, if you look at the popularity of the Switch and you look at the popularity of the concept of a handheld gaming device that plays the same games that you can play on your console, the way a Switch does, I think especially for some markets like Japan, where, if you look at kind of the uptake of the PS5 in a general sense and the numbers they're doing over there, I think a device that is a handheld probably holds some amount of appeal there. Maybe more so than it would here in the States, but it's different people are going to be in different situations when it comes to what they want out of a game machine. But it is interesting to me to see this kind of coming back around. Not even coming back around, but like this new market for handheld game machines, or this newly revitalized market, I guess I should say. It's not like handheld game machines haven't existed before, but this idea of that is kind of like happened after the Switch. I guess in some ways is piggybacking off of the success of the Switch conceptually, if not directly, to say, hey, what if you had a handheld version of this thing? I think that this is cool. But I wonder, if this starts happening in a grand scale sort of way and whatever else, I do think that we eventually run into that same scenario that kind of limited the appeal of the PSP and the Vita. Well, not the PSP so much, but the problems we've talked about, the certainly were a part of the PSP generation. That idea of like, do you want to play reduced versions of console games on the go? And when I think about it and the way I felt through the PSP era, the answer to that question was emphatically no. Because they were separate games. And I think that is the big difference here that makes me more of a believer in this. Because I don't want to play Need for Speed Most Wanted 510 edition. And like, here's this, start a new save on the same game that you already played on PS2. And, hey, it's going to be like a shittier version of it, but we added like 2 exclusive races. Or like when Mortal Kombat comes out and like on the Vita and it's Unchained and you can tap the screen to do, You know, they've added more weird modifiers to fights that, you know, involve you tapping the screen and whatever else. You know, it's like, okay, you're kind of adding something to the game, but also it's like I'm playing this game already in a much better way. And so I'm not going to start fresh. I'm not going to start over and play this game. And so this idea of like the games appearing in multiple locations, it was a very like negative proposition. You know, it was just like, I don't want to do this. Like I'm already playing these games. And so the difference now, you know, or at least conceptually, presumably, if this thing is a portable device capable of playing PlayStation 5 games, is that transferring is now real, and you know, the Steam Deck proves it. The Steam Cloud bears this out of like, hey, you know, I don't want to run the game in two separate locations, and so I want unique handheld games. But if I can play literally the exact same game in multiple locations, there are times where I am willing to accept a reduced version of that experience in exchange for the convenience of a handheld. And if I can pick up my save and just keep going, and I'm going to make some progress here, I'm going to play a couple of missions of this thing here at night in bed and whatever, wherever, on the go, and you know, wherever you're going. And then I'll come back, and at night I can play it here in the real place where I love to play games. And I think that works. I think that having that kind of connected experience across those devices is what makes this whole thing possible. And the Switch does that by virtue of it's only a handheld, right? I mean, the Switch kind of does that by default without really trying. All of these other devices will end up being a different situation. It'll be closer to something like the Steam Deck, where cloud saves will make it all possible, right? And so, you know, a handheld game device that is capable of playing PlayStation 5 games to some degree, presumably in some kind of reduced capacity, but ultimately, you know, they might be able to get to most of that reduction just by virtue of it being a lower resolution. Like here's our, you know, whether that's a 900p screen or 1080, you know, like here's our device that's capable of playing these games at 1080. And that's more or less what Xbox has done with the Xbox Series S. If they can find a way to, you know, compartmental, you know, like cram the Xbox Series S into a handheld, then they're 99% of the way there. And I think that holds appeal. Again, like for me, it's a more complicated thing of like, I would much rather have the open library of a PC than have a closed ecosystem sort of thing. But like, there are people that are locked into these console ecosystems and love them. And if you are a diehard PlayStation player and that's the only place where you play games and you're like PC games are for loser, whatever, the Greg Millers of the world, then the idea of a handheld device that can play PlayStation 5 games and picks up your saves and does all of that stuff is perfect, right? It's exactly perfect for like that type of player. Much like a portable Xbox would be perfect for that type of player. There are presumably fewer of them around, but nonetheless, I think that still works. And, you know, again, I think is the sort of thing that can help with reaching more players in certain regions of the world if this thing can be anywhere close to affordable, which is, you know, that's a big ask at this point, man. You're like, okay, well, how much does an Xbox Series S cost? Like, okay, could you actually put this out for that same price? Probably not, because you're going to want to put a great screen on it to make sure that it looks great. There are things you're going to want to do that are going to end up making it significantly more expensive. But like, you know, a premium Steam Deck is like $650. It's like a good ass Steam Deck, and some of their competitors are in the $700 range, if not higher. So, you know, it's there's certainly some number of players that will pay that kind of money for these devices. But I think if you're trying to grow the overall player base for these ecosystems, you kind of want this to be a budget device if you can swing it. You know, you could create a scenario here where, you know, like you think about the Xbox Series S. Well, there's no way that they would ever make this the same price as that, because it has to do more. But you could establish that as a middle ground in the Xbox kind of lineage, right? Where you've got the Series S is like, hey, you can hook this up to a TV and it'll play your games. Or if you want to go all the way, we got the Series X. But if you want to go part way, here is a handheld Xbox that you can play on this device, and also you can plug it into a TV. Presumably these will be dockable devices. I'm just guessing here, but it would kind of be weird if you couldn't. And so it creates a scenario where you're like, oh, well, I don't have any Xbox at all. I could get the Xbox Series S, but like, why not get an Xbox Series S that can also be on the go with me? Why wouldn't I just get that one instead for, presumably a little bit more money or well, hopefully not a lot more money. Yeah, and maybe that ends up being the sweet spot power-wise, or, if they can squeeze more power out of it, and then maybe that changes the conversation, and we're not really talking about it in terms of something that is an Xbox Series S, and maybe we're not talking about it in terms of like it's a greatly reduced PlayStation 5 experience. Maybe it's a totally acceptable PS5 experience that just happens to be portable. I don't know if they can get away with that in that form factor, but like, it'd be pretty cool. It'd be pretty cool, and you think about the larger PS4 library that you would presumably have access to on such a device, which again, we're just guessing here. There's entirely a scenario where they put that out and go, hey, it only plays PS5 games because we had to cut corners to make this thing work at all. And so the guts that we would need to play PS4 games are not available, or, who knows? That'd be unlikely, but, ultimately, we just don't know. But it sounds like that this is pretty early in development. Bloomberg says that it's basically aimed at expanding the reach of the PlayStation brand, which makes sense. I think in certain territories like Japan, where you look at kind of how the consoles, the console-ass consoles have been selling, and you look at how the Switch has been selling in that region, it's easy to look at this and go like, oh yeah, if Sony had one of these, people, honestly, it's the PSP problem all over again. Motherfuckers just want to play Monster Hunter and they're used to playing it handheld anyway. So if you get them a device and say like, here, this runs Monster Hunter Wilds, that maybe that'll be a big deal for them. I'm curious to see, because they launched it there and it seemed like there was a great deal of interest, but I don't know what the actual numbers are. But like the Japanese audience for the Steam Deck, because they launched their kind of Steam, their separate controller for Steam over there, and some of the other things they're doing to further introduce and expand the knowledge of the Steam Deck in the Japanese market. Like that seems smart too, just because of the success of the Switch there. And the success, the Switch succeeded everywhere, right? But when you look at the install base for the current console, and really we're only talking about PlayStation, because like, it's fun to talk about the Xbox in Japan, but like it's not like whatever. But when you look at like how many PlayStation 5s they've sold and some of this other stuff, and you look at the Switch numbers, and you just look at it and go like, yeah, it's easy to piece together why Sony would look at it and go like, yeah, if we had something that was handheld, this might be this might help us in this market. But I think a lot of it depends on price. Perhaps if you were to just randomly jack up the price 30% on top of that due to, I don't know, fun tariffs or something, maybe that would be cool. Maybe that would be a cool thing that cool guys could do. Casey Hudson's studio is shutting down. He started a new studio called Humanoid Origin back in 2021, and according to videogameschronicle.com, there was a LinkedIn post from the studio itself, not from any individual, saying, earlier today we informed our staff that Humanoid Origin will be shutting down despite efforts to shield the studio from broader challenges in the industry. An unexpected shortfall of funding left us unable to sustain operations. And so they were working on I'm not going to just tell you that they were working on a new, like their version of Mass Effect or whatever, but they were working on a brand new science fiction universe. And it was that they were always focused on that kind of character interaction. Like if you read the descriptions of what they were working on, you go like, oh, like Mass Effect. You were making something like Mass Effect. Like maybe it's not as Star Trek as Mass Effect was or whatever, but you were working on a thing that sounds an awful lot like Mass Effect, but without the name and with a totally different universe and whatever else. I'm sure that's reductive in a number of ways, but our main concern at this time is for our team. We're committed to supporting them in their transition to new employment. In our time together, the team achieved incredible progress and demonstrated that it's possible to do amazing work while fostering a culture of fun and creativity. We thank them for their talent, courage, and friendship. Thank you to everyone who supported us through our journey. That's tough, man. But that's not a unique story to them for sure. There are definitely other studios out there that hadn't even shipped anything, that were working away on a brand new thing, that suddenly the money just came up short for one reason or another, and that's that. They posted this update. Waiting for a page to load. They posted this this LinkedIn update, I believe, yesterday, if not the day before. It's funny. I had the page up, I closed the tab, and now I cannot get it to load again. Come on now. Anyway. That's a damn shame. Because that's, a character-focused, character-driven, kind of narrative-focused sci-fi universe. Like, that's a type of game I could always stand to see a little bit more of, when the scope and the budget is right, and all of that. And Casey Hudson is a talented guy that has had his name on a number of different things, and so that's frustrating. Speaking of frustrating, Ubisoft has been in the business of catching zero breaks lately. And this latest blow to their video games comes to you from Windows 11. The latest version of Windows 11, Windows 11 version 24H2, this is, again, according to videogameschronicle.com, has some kind of incompatibility that prevents a batch of Ubisoft games from running properly. These are situations that there's some incompatibility that can cause crashes and a variety of issues. Microsoft has acknowledged this on their end. After installing Windows 11 version 24H2, you might encounter issues with some Ubisoft games. These games might become unresponsive while starting, loading, or during active gameplay. In some cases, users might receive a black screen. The games affected are Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Assassin's Creed Origins, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Avatar, Frontiers of Pandora, and Star Wars Outlaws. The way that Microsoft handles these kind of larger version updates is they will look at what you do on your computer, and if they have known incompatibilities, they will actually issue what's called a compatibility hold that prevents you from automatically updating to this version of Windows. So, not everyone has upgraded to this version of Windows. It's something that they roll out rather gradually. And so it may be an issue that you have just simply have not updated to this version of Windows. I went ahead and manually updated to this version of Windows. I've at various times been in the Windows Insider program, and so I've taken the plunge on installing versions of Windows early. And so I'm running 24H2 on both of my Windows 11 machines here. All three of my Windows 11 machines here in the house. Now that I think about it, I have not encountered any. The Star Wars Outlaws is the only game that I have that is in, and I have not encountered any specific issues. Since then, the issue that I have encountered is actually with FL Studio, which powers my soundboard here. Oh. where ever since I updated to 24H2, if I launch FL Studio with my control surface over here, my Akai Fire, if this is plugged in when I launch FL Studio completely locks up. And that's something that didn't start happening until I took this update to Windows. There was an FL Studio update that I was hoping would fix it, but it did not. And so that's minorly frustrating. I don't know. And they say, we recommend that you do not attempt to manually update to 24H2 using the Windows 11 installation assistant or the media creation. I love that they're like, we recommend you don't manually update. And then they tell you 2 ways you could manually update. Don't use the installation assistant and don't use the media creation tool until this issue has been resolved. Ubisoft says that Ubisoft has issued some kind of patch for Star Wars Outlaws that they say mitigates some aspect of it. It says, we have deployed a temporary hotfix for players who were experiencing issues playing on 24H2. Please note that you may experience some performance issues while we work on a more permanent fix. As soon as it's ready, we'll let you know. And so Ubisoft is, updating their games to make sure that it is compatible with this stuff. At which point, once all of that stuff is mitigated, you should automatically update to the new version of Windows in some Windows update process. That's a weird one. I'm trying to think of this kind of the idea of a version of Windows getting a compatibility hold over game compatibility. I can't think of any specific scenarios that I can't remember anything specific like this happening before. But especially for a batch of Ubisoft games, what is Ubisoft putting in those games? God damn it. That's what we should be asking. And that's it for the news. I was going to say that I had the Microsoft Flight Simulator story in here, but we kind of already talked about that. But the story on the Flight Simulator stuff is they say that they have solved the issues and that they're bringing players in on a steady pace, is the quote that they issued a couple of days ago. So it sounds like that they are moving forward on that stuff. Those games are all on the same engine. No, not all of those Ubisoft games are on the same engine. So it's not as simple as that either. It's a strange scenario there. But yeah, I have not encountered any major issues with Windows since updating to that version of it. But I don't know. Windows 11, I think there are some legit reasons why people don't like Windows 11, but also as someone who's been running it, since as soon as I could start running it, basically, it is, I don't know. I like it. I used to have, my server was running Windows 10. And so I had one machine in the house that was still running Windows 10. And I grew to strongly dislike it over time. Just because of, as you get deeper and deeper into using Windows 11, it improves on a lot of the bullshit that like Windows 10 is kind of a half step in a weird way in terms of and Windows 11 is still this way. Which is funny because there's so many legacy things that people like about Windows that are just it's still in 11. It's still there. If you want to use the old control panel, it's still there. But they've made the process of not using it so much better in 11 than it was in 10 that now you kind of don't need to use it as much. Windows 11 is such a better OS for multiple monitor scenarios. Windows 10 was so fucking bad about it. And as someone who has 3 monitors hooked up, Windows 11 is so much smarter and more aware of these multi-monitor situations. That's been huge. So yeah, I don't know, man. I think everyone uses their computers differently, right? So it's like we were talking about with S.T.A.L.K.E.R. It's that conversation of well, I don't have any problems. Well, a lot of people do. But the problems I've had with Windows 11 over the years have been relatively minor. And I do a lot of weird shit with with computers, so I feel like I would see a lot. But Your fucking mileage may vary, I guess. Why don't we get into some emails? podcast@guard.bike is the email address. You can send in your emails to me. I will look at them. And I will read them. And we will talk about them together. Brandon from Houston writes in and says, what happened to game kiosks? With the discussion of Astrobot potentially selling below its potential, it got me thinking about how game kiosks have disappeared and what effect that has on the market. I grew up as a Nintendo kid, but remember playing dozens of hours of Sonic the Hedgehog just from playing it in stores. It seems like a lot of kids would want Astrobot if they could actually see it and play it, but in my neighborhood, game kiosks basically don't exist anymore. Is that a missed opportunity? And while I have you, has Sony done some real damage to their brand by not cultivating children for the past 20 years and instead focusing on even older players with money? I still see Nintendo kiosks. I think the Target near me has a Nintendo kiosk for Switch games, but I don't know if it's playable or if it's just watching trailers. I don't know if there's any gameplay involved in that, or if it's just like a bunch of buttons you can hit to watch trailers or not. But people buy games on the internet now. You know, people download demos and play games, you know, when the demos exist. And people stay home to get their video games now, you know. And so I think that's probably a big part of it, is that as more and more sales move away from retail, I think that the support that retailers get from the hardware manufacturers has probably changed a little bit. One of the fun and weird things about going to E3 or even CES before E3 is Nintendo's booth always had a section of it carved out for retailers. And so you would have all the kiosks with the games, and then they would have an upstairs area where you were doing your appointments, where they would just have more kiosks with more games. And then they would have a whole area that would be, you know, it had World of Nintendo branding all over it. And that was the branding that they used for retailers who wanted to have their own dedicated Nintendo section. And this is something that I think started in the NES era, but it lasted for, you know, like a couple of decades, probably at least. And it was always interesting because you would go in this section and it would be like, we've got neon signs that say Nintendo, and you could buy one for your store. Not, you couldn't buy it right there, but it was showing you the things you could get as a retailer to put in your store. And they would have like the kiosks and stuff there to like look at the durability on these kiosks and how sturdy they are. Like here's some shelving units that are the perfect size for holding Super Nintendo cartridges or whatever, and building your wall of boxes that people can choose from, and all of the different things that they made, that Nintendo made and then would sell. I imagine not for that much money, because at some point, you know, you want retailers building a section that looks like a big Nintendo. Because that's going to help your presence at stores and going to help you sell more stuff at stores and whatever else. So I'm sure that they did have, you know, the retailers had to pay for the kiosks and stuff, but there was just a lot of stuff, big and small, for all different types of stores, for different sizes of events and everything else that you as a retailer could lean on to help make your section more attractive. And obviously, you know, like that stuff just doesn't exist in the same way. And even in the holidays, when, you know, like people are buying gifts for people and maybe are doing a little bit more in-store shopping as opposed to digital purchases, those are people who don't need a kiosk to play the games. You know, like your grandmother doesn't need to sit down and go like, well, I don't, maybe if I could play a little bit of this game, this is Indiana Jones, see if this game is any good for little Billy, whatever, you know, whatever. And so I just think you don't have as many scenarios of like kids. Kids want to see that stuff. Like, hell, I want to see that stuff. Every time I go through a store that has a game section, I at least want to look at it. But I'm not buying anything. Like, and I wonder if how many people would look at that and go, oh, cool, I should get that game, and then go home and buy it, go home and buy it digitally or whatever. Probably enough that they feel that they don't necessarily need that. And, shelf space is at a premium in these stores nowadays anyway, so they're not going to devote even more room to this than they already do. And so the idea of putting one kiosk for each piece of hardware in there, it's probably just not a good scenario. The last time I think we had any kind of like realistic and kind of like longer conversations about in-store demos, it was around the release of the Oculus Rift and, to a lesser extent the Quest, but the idea of like, oh, you could go into a Best Buy and you could try out this VR headset and play a game on it or whatever, and then buy it, and as someone who, that just seems like a germ factory even before COVID. Now these days you're like, fuck that. Like, it made me realize, I don't know. Like, I don't know that I will ever do a VR demo ever again. I don't know that I will go out to a thing and say, yes, put on a VR helmet that a bunch of other people have been wearing. Like, that's something I'm going to do that. And so, I just don't think that, the shopping patterns have changed so much for people in a general sense, but obviously with video games, as more and more things go digital, the idea of putting a kiosk in a store so people could try a game out before they buy it, it's just not how people shop anymore, or enough people don't shop that way that it's probably a difficult sell on every end of the equation. The stores might not want them. The hardware manufacturers might not want to make them anymore to the degree that they used to. The number of locations where games are being sold is probably much different now. That's something that, like, if you were a game-specific retailer, like a GameStop probably has something like that still, right? I feel like, I can't remember the last time I was in a GameStop, but I think the GameStop in Petaluma still had some kind of kiosk in it. I think it was broken, and I believe it was a Switch kiosk, but I believe they did have some kind of Nintendo focused kiosk. But yeah, Pat has a good point. Stores really don't want kids and teens hanging around. That's the other thing, is as the entire world has become significantly more hostile to teens who want to do shit. Teens out on the town, out on the prowl, making things happen. The world hates that now more than ever. And so that's something that probably impacts a lot of that stuff as well. Ryan writes in and asks, do you think Valve's goal with SteamOS is to make it widely available to anyone who wants to run it on PC hardware? Like, you build a sick rig and instead of installing Windows, you're doing a fresh install of SteamOS. Will this be the serious gamer option? I've been reading a lot of old interviews with Gabe Newell after watching the Half-Life 2 20th anniversary documentary, and the guy really hates what Windows has become. He's been championing Linux as the future of PC gaming for well over a decade. Do you think there's a future where my 5090 build boots into SteamOS, or I can spec an Alienware build with SteamOS right from the Dell factory? Are there enough external forces like anti-cheat and overall compatibility issues that would prevent SteamOS from gaining wider adoption beyond Valve's own hardware? So you can do that now. You can go download SteamOS from Valve and install it on whatever you want. It might not work because the drivers for certain things and whatever else are just not available. But yes, there are SteamOS images out there you can download and try to install. There are also derivatives of SteamOS that are also focused on kind of the same thing. that you can get your hands on to more or less do that. Will there a time come when you can install SteamOS as you're in the middle of purchasing a pre-built PC? Anything's possible, and I'd like to think that that's something that could eventually happen, but yeah, you can still run big picture mode on a Windows machine, and that sidesteps all of the issues of SteamOS, which those are, compatibility issues for anti-cheat and things of that nature. Those are the things that prevent SteamOS from taking over right now, right? It's not full compatibility. It's still a little janky in spots, like it's not there yet. If they could get over the hump on that stuff and be able to say, yes, this is as compatible as running it on Windows. This runs as well, if not better in some cases, because, we've streamlined the OS to, really provide as many resources as possible to the running game, whatever. If you're able to squeeze a little more power out of it or something, like, sure. But it's just not there yet. And that makes it just enough of a pain in the ass that, from just even just a customer support perspective, I wonder, because they will obviously on a Steam Deck, they will tell you, hey, this game is not compatible if you go to try to download a game that they know doesn't work. But I wonder if there is still any kind of like increase in customer support requests either on the Valve side or on the publisher end of things. Like when Destiny 2 doesn't work, like how many emails does Bungie get a week from people going like, hey, I'm pushing this, but I'm trying to get it to run on my Steam Deck and it doesn't work. What do I got to do? From people who just like don't read the message or whatever. Like I wonder if that's a thing. I don't know. I think that stuff is really great. I think that Proton and everything that Valve is doing to make SteamOS work and to make Linux work, it's awesome. There's probably some argument to be made that like Proton is making developers is giving developers an easy way out of actually genuinely supporting Linux because they can just ship a Windows version and go like, I don't know, Valve will figure it out. Or something like that, but I don't think that, like, who cares? If the game runs, the game runs. If Valve is willing to do the work, then awesome. So it's anything is possible. I would love to see this anti-cheat stuff get resolved. I just don't know if it's possible because I don't know enough about like when I hear it broken down as to why games with anti-cheat cannot run on SteamOS and cannot run on Linux in a general sense, with a compatibility layer like Proton or Wine or whatever. They make it sound very insurmountable because so much of it is built in a way that it is expecting real Windows to be there, and anything that deviates from that fucks it up and says like, nope, can't run. Nope. Apex just took the step of removing support for Steam Decks because of anti-cheat. And so in some ways it feels like, we're going ever so slightly backwards on that sort of stuff. If things change on Windows, and in terms of like the kernel itself and what access software gets to that, in a way that basically removes, basically prevents modern anti-cheat from working that way. And if we see any kind of change in that, on that front, as people make demands for not giving individual pieces of software that level of access to the hardware, maybe developers will have to change their approach in ways that will be friendlier across multiple platforms. I would love to see that happen. Because I think that all of the kernel level anti-cheat stuff it's an accident waiting to happen. It's something that I routinely engage with on a fucking daily basis playing some of these games, because it's just the reality of it. But that is definitely a potential increase in attack surface for people to work with, and so there's very real concerns around that sort of stuff. Just not to a degree that is preventing anyone from going forward with rolling out that type of anti-cheat. Like there are not enough people that care about that stuff to move the needle on sales or whatever. So unless something changes at the Windows level where Microsoft says like, hey, we need to make this change to further secure Windows and prevent bullshit from happening down the line, and that sadly that's going to break all of your bullshit anti-cheat stuff, so come up with something else. I don't see a reason for any of that to change, and as a result, I don't see anything. I don't see any good reason for it to change on the like Linux support side. So it's hard to see anything really moving that needle and really changing things for the better on that front. So yeah, I don't know. It would take someone actively exploiting this stuff and really like it would take a much like something even worse than like the CrowdStrike stuff. It would take something even worse than that probably to get people to care again. Like people cared there for about a week and then forgot about it. So yeah, I don't know. I like SteamOS and I think it's a shame that I can't play Destiny 2 specifically on a Steam Deck. That is the game that I'm like, fuck, man. Like I would probably play more Destiny 2 if I could play it on a Steam Deck. I barely play it. But like if I could just knock out some missions here and there, and that's a game where it's like just casual enough to where I don't care about playing it on a smaller screen. Call of Duty is a game I don't want to play on a smaller screen because it's harder to line up headshots. I have a much better time on a, like I have these, I guess these are what, 27-inch monitors, these 30s, I forget. These are 27s. Like being nice and close to a 27-inch monitor or being nice and close to, like a 55-inch TV or something like that. Like I want to be able to see the shit I'm shooting at range, and a smaller screen gets in the way of that. But like I would play more Destiny 2 if it ran on a Steam Deck for sure. Adam writes in and says, in your review of the Razer Wolverine, you mentioned that you didn't especially love the feel of the D-pad. And it seems like that's a common refrain when it comes to modern controllers. Everyone focuses on the sticks and triggers, while the D-pad and face buttons feel like an afterthought. Is there a modern controller that you think has done the D-pad right? And is there a classic controller that you think all D-pads should aspire to be? So I think that the current Xbox controller has a good D-pad on it. I like the current PlayStation D-pad just fine as well, but that is partially just, as a result of, being used to it after decades of using it, right? But I think the current Xbox D-pad is quite good. I always look at these things as like, yo, man, you gotta play fighting games with this, and you got to do fighting game type of moves on this D-pad, and that's sort of how I think about it. Where I think the D-pad on the DualSense, I like it. It is sometimes a D-pad that causes me a mild amount of pain. I just feel like I'm pressing it harder than I need to for whatever reason. But I think it's pretty good. Yes. Auckland on the Discord says the current PlayStation D-pad is so squeaky, and yes, it fucking is. As far as like classic D-pads that all should aspire to be, I don't know that there's a great answer to that question anymore. I think that for the games that were on the SNES, that D-pad was very good. But I don't necessarily want that D-pad again. It's not like I don't know that I would necessarily want that. Japanese Saturn controllers are quite good. Quite good on the D-pad. Yeah, but as far as like current controllers and stuff, they're on. It's another one of the Black Friday like sale things or whatever. Well, like those Ghoulie Kit King Kong 3, the KK3 Max controllers are on like a light discount. It's not a massive one. And I almost bought one of those. I have a KK2. And I was like, well, this one's got maglev vibration, and it's just like all this stuff that you just look at and go like, oh yeah. I want to try. It's people are using these instead of Hall effect joysticks. I forget what they are called, but it is a different technology that achieves a similar goal of not allowing for stick drift. And I cannot remember what it actually is anymore. But someone was selling a few of them in terms of as add-ons or replacement sticks for some existing controllers. I couldn't really find a number of like pre-built controllers that already had them in there, but it seems like there's some newer technology for analog sticks that are also seemingly doing something similar to Hall effect sticks, if not potentially better. But yeah, the name escapes me. Sorry. Let's see. TMR. Yes, that's what it is. These TMR sticks. These are electromagnetic joysticks, and the Ghoulie Kit people sell them, but they don't have a pre-built controller with them in there yet. I will probably, if I can find a good looking, I found one controller that seemed to have TMR sticks built in, but the controller itself looked like garbage. I was like, oh, okay, I don't think I want to do that. Matt from Loganville, Georgia writes in and says, how do you deal with your presumably ever-growing backlog of games? I can't buy new controllers right now. I bought a DualSense Edge, the gray, the 30th anniversary gray one. I found myself with an opportunity to buy one after they had sold out, and I was like, I don't need this, but I should, and so I have one of those on the way, and so maybe I'll crack open a can of dragon soup with one of those or whatever. And so that has prevented me from purchasing any new controllers. I came very close to buying one of those KK3 Maxes, and then I was like, oh, I just spent too much money on a controller that I don't even need. I can't. Anyway, Matt asks, how do you deal with your growing backlog of games? You just let it go. I'm just one guy. There's, as much as I want to play every game that is available, there are some that I'm just not going to get to, and that's okay. That's always been the case. The difference was, like you would work with other people and they would play different games that you play, and and you would all kind of come together to talk about games. But that's so I've never played games. I've always had a growing backlog. There's always been stuff like that for as long as I've been doing this. I will install games and then launch them once and then not have time to get to them. And by the time I remember they exist, it's like enough time has passed. I'm like, well, I'm just going to move on from this. And I got all these other games I need to play right now. And like Dragon Age is a great example of like, I would love to play some more Dragon Age. It seems fucking awesome. And hearing from more and more people as they play through it, as how fucking good that game is, it seems rad. And so I wish I had time to play Dragon Age, but I just don't. And so I've played a chunk of it. I got familiar with it. I was like, this seems really cool. I would love to play some more of this, but 9 more games. And then literally I'm like, oh, but instead now I am playing Stalker 2, or I'm trying to play Stalker 2 is maybe the right way to phrase that. And so you just kind of move on. You just do what you can, and play what you can, and whatever, you know. Randy in Portland says, I just bought a copy of Mark Echo's Getting Up Contents Under Pressure. Great. Congratulations. You are embarking on a wonderful adventure. He goes on here. Because I thought it would be a good, stupid addition to my collection. What? I couldn't resist owning a game displaying the voice acting talents of Andy Dick. What's the dumbest game you've bought or kept because you thought it was dumb? God damn it, Randy. Getting Up is a cool fucking game. Getting Up has an authenticity to it that it doesn't, that a lot of other games that are fucking around the edges of hip hop culture and graffiti, certainly, it feels like it just understands more of that world, or is better at presenting more of that world than a lot of other games. And it's got a fantastic soundtrack. It's very good. It was always very good. It's like the combat in it is cool enough, and it's. I don't remember Andy Dick being in it. What character does Andy Dick even play in Getting Up? I mean, he's not White Mike. Aunt Beth. Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. Adam West plays the police chief, and he does a really good job. But yeah, that's a solid ass game that I really appreciated at the time. Again, especially back then, man. So many games, and it's still true now. But I just think a lot of games don't engage with the wider parts of it. Like, especially like graffiti is such a specific thing. With such a specific history, and this is my problem with like something like a Jet Set Radio. I think the graffiti stuff they did in that game was terrible, like from a mechanical perspective, and also like how it was represented conceptually. Like, it just felt like this tacked on thing of just like, here you go, I don't know, there's graffiti in here, swirl the controllers around, now go find some more paint cans. Jet Set Radio is a stylistic wonder. It's an amazing package, but I think when you break down the individual pieces of Jet Set Radio and go beyond like the vibe or whatever, it kind of falls apart a little bit. Yeah, I don't know. Getting Up is a cool game, and I think it's really neat. But if you strip away a lot of the kind of story they're telling, and then in the way they're telling the story, man, there's like great moments in that game, that are just like and they pair the soundtrack with the kind of breakout moments of the game like really, really, really well. Like Getting Up just understood, like there's a cinematic quality to that game where they just understood the presentational aspect. They understood what they could get away with at the time. I mean, it's a PlayStation 2 game, right? There's limitations, right? But they made the most of what they had to make that game have an outstanding vibe. And they told a story that felt resonant and meaningful at the time as well. Underneath all of that, it is an okay beat 'em up. Like if we're, I'm not going to sit here and tell you this is the perfect video game, 10 out of 10. It's like one of those 7 or 8s out of 10s that you just go like, yeah, this game is going to stand out for a long time for weird reasons. And you wouldn't necessarily expect Mark Echo to be the guy to get all that right, but he did. Cool game. Brian writes in and says, I'm playing all of the Mario games in chronological order because that's how my brain works, and I just got to Super Mario Sunshine. I played it at launch, but never since. I think it's good. I'm playing the Switch version with the updated camera controls. So I know that's making a big difference because at the time I first played it, I remember being fairly underwhelmed. Now I'm finding it pleasant as hell, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it while acknowledging that it's a far cry from the magic of Super Mario 64. What's everyone's deal with this game? Why do you think some people either love it or hate it? Is it okay if a Mario game is just okay? Is it somehow less forgivable if a Mario game is a solid 7.5 out of 10? Yes. I mean, I think, if we look at the standards for the Mario franchise, then a Mario game getting a 7.5 would be disappointing, right? And also, Super Mario Sunshine with better camera controls is kind of fixing the main problem with Super Mario Sunshine. The camera control in that game, particularly when you get to those levels that are trying to mimic side scroll, like side view original platformer levels, they do such a fucking bad job with that in particular, that it's disgusting. And so there are things about that game that were extremely frustrating back then that if you mitigate that by solving the camera problem, it's a much smoother ride overall. I think that the way that, you shoot water on stuff and the way that they handle those controls and everything, is not great. And it was never great. And fixing the camera and making some of those changes that they did doesn't really make that aspect of the game any better. There are aspects of that game that are just fine, every time I go back and play it, I think I am personally a little shell shocked because in committing the amazing sin of giving that game some kind of 8 or something, people fucking called for my head, because they fucking suck. It's there is that situation of if you're asking, is it okay if a Mario game is just okay? I think so. A lot of fucking assholes on the internet didn't, and fuck them, But that's one of those standout things. I remember reviewing that game. I had a beanbag in my office, and I remember sitting in there with the fucking lights out, sitting on this beanbag playing Mario Sunshine, and I had to close my door because I was just fucking cursing so much. I had to close my office because some of those side view where they're like, okay, we're going to take flood off and you're going to do this, and some of the camera stuff in that game was so fucked. That it was just I was just disgusted, man. I remember people coming into the office and watching it for a while, as I was playing it, and just being like, what the fuck? Just as I was playing it, you're like, what the fuck is this goddamn thing? And I think that that game, yes, is that game okay? Sure. When you compare it to a lot of other platformers that were certainly coming out in the years around then and certainly in the years before, it's probably still better than a lot of those games. But in the context of hey, here's a game in the Mario franchise, which has resulted in some of the greatest games ever made and blah, 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 all this other stuff, it's fucking terrible in that context. But I think a lot of that is because of, things like the camera control and which that Switch version of the game does fix. And, if you're emulating it other ways, there are ways for you to mitigate some of those issues. And there was weird little performance. If I'm remembering correctly, there was some performance stuff in that game in kind of the worst possible spots. And I remember that being frustrating as well, but it's obviously it's been a very long time since I reviewed that game. So, trying to kind of recapture all of those feelings, some of that stuff is a little bit lost to time. But when I go back and play it now, it's not a good game. Every time I start from the beginning and I get to that part where you're chasing the fake Mario around and having to deal with the camera and as you he's not difficult to catch, but if you run around in circles with him for a while, it's just God, this is fucking no good, man. And then you get into the later levels of it and just not a very good game. But not a very good Mario game, I guess is maybe the right way to phrase that if we're being fully honest about it. But yeah, is it somehow less forgivable if a Mario game is a solid 7.5 out of 10? I think if you're taking that context into it and looking at what the Mario games have been and what they've represented for Nintendo, but as gaming as a whole, yes, I do think that a game in that franchise only being worthy of a 7.5 or 8 or whatever is somewhat disappointing. You know, it's like, even if you're saying like, yeah, this is still a good game, it's still great in some ways, but it's got these, significantly major issues. It's unfortunate, because when they knock it out of the park, they fucking make some of the greatest games ever made with that fucking asshole in it. And Wonder shows that they're still capable of innovating on the concept and still capable of finding new things to do with Mario that are like fun and cool to do. And and Galaxy would come out not that long after Sunshine in the grand scheme of things. I did not play either of the Galaxy games when they were new. I didn't review either of them. It was almost like after reviewing Sunshine, I was just like, man, fuck this. I'm done with this bullshit. Fuck these assholes. And so I didn't play Galaxy for years. Like I did not play Galaxy when it was originally out, and Galaxy 2, same deal. And so I don't really have very many thoughts about those games. It's just like, yeah, I don't know, man. They made Galaxy and people seem to like them. Like every time I played them, I'm like, oh, this is okay. I don't know, whatever. Like, I don't have any particular attachment to the Galaxy games. It's been really fun, I'll say, and you'll get to this game someday. It's been really fun going back to Super Mario Odyssey. My daughter has been playing that a little bit here and there, and so she's always looking for help. She's always like, I'm so like, and so I get to play little chunks of Super Mario Odyssey and remind myself just how fucking cool that game is. And the hat stuff of like, make the hat stay out there and jump off it, and the way they handle going in the pipes and doing the 2D stuff is so cool and fun, and all of the different forms you get to turn into with the hats and everything. And that is just a delightful fucking video game, man. Just a fun ride. It's not difficult. If you want to get every single moon, yeah, there's going to be some stuff in there that's trickier than others, but like, just getting to the end of that game, like, it's not super tough. You can make your way through it, and it looks nice, it runs well, and it's just a great fucking cool fucking game. Except for the water level, which I just, like, as I was playing through it again, I was like, God, this sucks. And also the stuff, like, this is something we were doing just yesterday. The stuff where you have to like be wearing the right outfit to be let in a door is one of those things that's really frustrating when you're playing with a 5-year-old. You're like, okay, well, you need to wear a resort outfit. Do you think that this hat is a resort style hat? And no? Okay, well, what about that? Okay, well, you don't have enough coins to actually buy the resort hat, so now we have to wander around here and find, it's interesting. It's interesting going through that with my daughter. Though they don't play video games. I try to provide for my children. I try to give them everything that they need. I try. They have access to damn near any video game that they would want to play. But I don't know how this happened, but they accidentally installed a SpongeBob skinned Doodle Jump clone on the TV. Like, I think just like they hit the home screen of the TV and it was showing a bunch of apps and stuff, and there was some kind of SpongeBob thing here, and they managed to select that and managed to install it. And so I walked in here and they were just playing it. And I was like, the fuck is happening? And that's all they want to play now is this SpongeBob skinned Doodle Jump ripoff. They don't even want to play it. They want me to play it because they're not good enough at it. And so I have to play this SpongeBob themed Doodle Jump clone and collect as many coins as I can because they want to buy the Christmas themed SpongeBob skin, which we got enough coins for this morning. I'm proud to state. And my son wants me to restart the game every time I get out of the first level because it doesn't look underwater enough. The first level looks like it's underwater, but the later levels have different color palettes. And SpongeBob is, they've got like an underwater desert, not a SpongeBob. Weird. And so whenever I get to level 2, he wants me to quit and start over. And so I've seen level 3 once. Ian from Toronto writes in and says, on the last podcast, you remarked that being able to pet a dog in a video game is a meaningless interaction, but the public seem to expect it now. Remember when it was novel for a video game like Duke Nukem 3D to have flushable toilets? Have video game dogs become the new flushable toilets? No, because flushable toilets were always cool. Yeah, totally. I mean, there's nothing wrong with meaningless interactions in a game. I think that they add a lot of color and a lot of flavor to games when you can just do weird shit. The specific problem with the dog thing is it became this larger thing that people were like, "Oh, can you pet the dog?" Like people didn't really care. It just became this dumb fucking meme thing that then developers felt like, "Oh, right. Well, we shipped the game without being able to pet the dog, and a bunch of people got weird about it, and now we're gonna patch in dog petting because people fucking won't shut the fuck up about it." And I think that sucks. I think that's the thing that actually sucks. Is popular Twitter account shaped game development in a dumb way. They're just like, ah. Dan from St. Louis writes in and says, just realized you released the podcast on Tuesday, and then goes on to say, like, yeah, over the history of me releasing podcasts, it's been on Tuesdays. I've noticed a large amount of my podcasts in general release on Tuesday. What's the deal with that? Are the numbers better? Does it just happen to be a slower time of the week? Was it traditionally when the most people were available? Games used to release on Tuesdays. Games used to hit stores on Tuesdays. And so Tuesdays that was the new release day for stuff. And so most embargoes would expire on a Tuesday. And so if you were recording a podcast on a Tuesday, it would lead to a situation where you're like, okay, this game just came out and now we are able to talk about it. And now we can have the best conversation we can have about this game. And that's changed. And now, a lot of stuff will come out on Friday. Music now comes out on Friday a lot as well, which is always, which that still feels weird to me. The like stay up late Thursday night to listen to new album stuff, because it used to be same deal. You would ride your bike down to the warehouse on Tuesday morning, or, maybe Monday night if you were insane because you needed to get, use your illusion 1 and 2 or whatever. But yeah, games would always release on Tuesday. And so it always made sense for a podcast to happen on a Tuesday because it was when games came out. Sometimes there would be some pushback from other departments or other business people or whatever. They were like, you spent your whole day on Tuesday recording this damn podcast, but it's when the games came out. You could have recorded this video review. You could have recorded this. You could have recorded that. And like, fuck off. Let's see here. Sam from Austin, Texas writes in and says, given the state of Stalker 2 at release, this has me questioning why don't more games just release in early access. It seems like with all the botched launches we've seen over the past few years, many games would have benefited with more time, and more importantly, a community to provide more eyes on their game. It's hard to imagine Stalker's audience wouldn't have embraced this strategy. It also seems unlikely that your game really comes in so hot that you actually don't know if your release will be bad until 6 weeks before launch, but I could be wrong, and I'm not a developer by any means. I also understand there's probably marketing and specific deals that would prevent publishers from doing this, but I hope devs start to embrace this release strategy so we can avoid this negative reception dance we have to do every time a game launches. I don't think anything changes. I think that, when big games ship, the big games ship. And unless they ship in such a state of early access that the entire game is not there, what's the point? Like, if they were to release Stalker 2, if last week's release had an early access sticker on it or whatever, what would that really change? They're still asking the same amount of money. The game is still in a state, all it creates is a situation where people in weird forum conversations can argue. They can tap the sign and go like, "Oh, it's early access." Like, okay, well, I guess I'll just wait then. Like, what, And so it creates a non-launch. The problem with early access games is that they never get a big rush of a launch day. They get the day they launch on early access, which has an asterisk next to it because you're like, well, it's not really launched. It's really, it's out and they're charging money for it, but it's not, And then when they hit 1.0, people have forgotten about the game already. Half the time when a game comes out of early access, I go, oh, that didn't happen already? Oh, geez. Okay. Well, whatever. I'm okay. Like, there are some exceptions to that where, like, oh, now the game is coming out on console because we're out of early access. And so they kind of get to have the marketing push that comes with a new platform launch in conjunction with their PC version coming out of early access. And so sometimes that's a way that they can kind of work it both ways. But also, I think when full priced retail games, when we think about games that are going to be $70 or have a $100 collector's edition, I think when we think about big budget, big, quote unquote, big games, I think that they don't get to do early access. Known studios doing, things with big marketing pushes and everything else, I think that they don't get to do that because they're going to have eyes on their game no matter what. And people are going to judge their game either way because they're going to charge money for it either way. Launching in the Xbox game preview program, like, who cares? I like early access for certain types of games. For certain types of games that are getting rebalanced, for certain types of games where, like, it's easy from a conceptual perspective to imagine more content being bolted onto it. Like, Hades was a really great example of just like, okay, like, we've got entire tile sets, biomes, whatever, to add to this game as it goes. And so in conjunction with retooling weapons and fixing things and making the types of changes you make as you're balancing your game and as you're going through that early access period, they also could have these very major content drops, which works for that type of a roguelike game. I think games that are purely story driven, that's not me saying that Hades doesn't have a story, but it's obviously got a lot of moving pieces in it that I think make it a little more conducive to that approach. What does Stalker 2 early access look like? Hey, you can play the game start to finish, but it's fucked. And then what? Eventually it's less fucked? Like, are they, hey, we're going to ship this and we're just going to remove a third of the quests from the back part of the game. And so you're eventually going to run out of stuff to do and just wander around going, oh, I guess I got to wait for them to patch it. Like, doing it with these kind of more purely story-driven, quest-driven games leads to a situation where they go like, oh, we went and added a bunch of stuff to the first few hours of the game. And all the people who bought it in early access and have saves already are like, well, fuck you. They're like, oh, well, I'm not going to go back and ever see that stuff. Or it forces them to bend their game design in ways to where they have to now address this existing audience that maybe is 20 hours in on a game. And they go, oh, we got to do this. With Baldur's Gate, they were able to do with various acts. And you see some story-driven games try to do this where they go like, hey, with 1.0, we're adding the final act of the game. And depending on how your game is built, there are certainly ways to do that because you can have kind of an ending thing. In an open world game like Stalker, Like, what are you going to do? You're going to finish a quest and then just throw up a screen that says, thanks. Come back when we patch the rest in. Like, that doesn't work for a situation like that. And I don't think it works for a game of that size and scope and budget and everything else. I think I don't think players will give you the leeway that you might be looking for out of an early access launch with games like that. And so, more linear experiences that can have a hard stop, you can get away with it, right? Games that are built for replayability, I think, are ideal for this, where you're not going to have a situation where you go like, oh, I got this save and now it's invalid because, they redid the new player experience. They redid it and all this other stuff that I'll never, ever see because I'm up here at Act 5 or whatever. A game where you are doing run-based things is just like, well, you still have your inventory of things that you've permanently unlocked over the course of you playing the game, and that's fine. We can still tell this story the way we want it to be told because you're going to see the beginning parts of it naturally as a result of you replaying it. And a story-driven game does not benefit from that whatsoever. So, like, S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2, there would be zero benefit to them launching it as early access other than for people that are trying to solve an argument about it and be like, well, it's early access, which is the worst. Like, no one deserves, like, developers do not deserve to use that as that type of crutch. To go like, oh, our game's super buggy, so we just slapped the early access logo on it, and we're still charging $70 for it, but haha, it's early access, we'll fix it when we get to it. Like, no. Like, think about what you're actually asking for. Like, you don't want this. You do not want more developers trying to pull that shit off. That's ridiculous. Let's see here. Noah writes in about 80s wrestlers. No, Noah in Mexico. So wrestling comes up a lot on video game podcasts. I'm of an age, born in 1977, that I grew up during the WWF heyday in Los Angeles. The thing is, I've never watched a wrestling match in my life. My only exposure is remembering the commercials. I know all the words to the Thumb Wrestlers commercial. I watched the WWF cartoon a few times, and I played one of the arcade games. I also had muscle figures, but I don't think those count. So without further ado, these are all the wrestlers I remember without checking. I'm skipping the obvious ones like Hulk and Ultimate Warrior. Are these all real? Are they good? And are they WWF? So he's provided this is a list of every wrestler that Noah can come up with. Number 1, Hacksaw Jim. Yeah, yes, that is. I'm just going to read the whole list. Hacksaw Jim. Number 2, the Junkyard Dog. Number 3, the $1 Million Man. Number 4, Bam Bam Brown. Number 5, Mr. Perfect. Number 6, Honky Tonk Man. Number 7, Boris something or other. Number 8, the Iron Sheik. Number 9, Captain Lou Albano. Number 10, something Heenan. He looks exactly like 80s Tim Thomerson. I don't know who that is. 11, Hakeem. Number 12, the guy who looks like a cop. 13, the Hitman Heart. 14, American Dream. 15, the Bushwhackers. There were 2 of them. 16, Robbie something or other. 17, the super hairy bald guy. 18, the guy who looks like he's in the Bear Country Jamboree with a hanky. 19, something Brasco. 20, the Asian guy who looks like the Bond villain who throws his hat. Yeah, yep. 21, Rowdy Piper. 22, Drill Sergeant. Number 23, Tito from the cartoon. Number 24, Mr. Studley. And number 25, Steamboat Jim. Man, Steamboat Jim. That guy was a worker. That Steamboat Jim could really tear it up. Him and Bam Bam Brown. That's a 5-star match. I don't care where that's a main event anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. This is mostly accurate. I don't know. Yeah, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Junkyard Dog, $1 Million Man, Bam Bam Brown. There was Bad News Brown, and there was Bam Bam Bigelow. So you're not right, but I see how you would get there. Mr. Perfect, Honky Tonk Man, Boris something or other. Is that Boris Zukov? Was Boris Zukov ever in the WWF? Like, I can't think of anyone actually named Boris that was in the WWF that this guy would have heard of. I can't think of any other Borises. Iron Sheik, Captain. Yeah. If you're just thinking generic Russian dudes, then yeah, maybe like a Nikolai Volkov fits there. Iron Sheik, Captain Lou Albano. Captain Lou, like everyone, between him playing Mario and him being in the Cyndi Lauper video, Albano got around. Something Heenan, obviously that's Bobby the Brain Heenan. Hakeem, yes, Hakeem the African Dream. Just tremendous. The guy who looks like a cop, it's the big boss man. The Hitman Hart, yeah, Bret the Hitman Hart. American Dream, that's Dusty Rhodes. Bushwhackers, yep. Robbie something or other. I can't think of a Robbie in like 80s WWF. Like a Robbie. Yeah, nothing. You think it's Marty Jannetty? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Sure. The super hairy bald guy is probably George the Animal Steel. The guy who looks like he's in the Bear Country Jamboree with a hanky, is that going to be Hillbilly Jim? I'm guessing that's Hillbilly Jim. Something Brasco. That's not, as much as I think Donnie Brasco would have been an interesting character in 80s WWF. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Briscoe, yeah, could have been, maybe one of the Briscoes, but like I don't know, like did Gerald Briscoe wrestle in the WWF in a meaningful way back in the 80s? Like, anyway. The Asian guy who looks like the Bond villain who throws his hat, that's probably Mr. Fuji. Rowdy Roddy Piper. Drill Sergeant, you're probably thinking of Sergeant Slaughter. Yeah, Gerald Briscoe didn't have a WWF run until the Attitude Era, I guess, if you want to consider that a run as one of the Stooges. Tito from the cartoon, that's Tito Santana. Mr. Studley, I don't, like, is that maybe like a Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff? Maybe something like that. I don't know. And Steamboat Jim, I'm guessing you're thinking of Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, but also Hillbilly Jim. Oh, Big John Studd. Right. Yes, Mr. Studley. Yes, Big John Studd. Of course. Steamboat Jim is my favorite wrestler name. Is my favorite wrestler name. Oh, man. Steamboat Jim is going to take the fucking bare knuckle metal weight championship. Let's see. Pavel from Sweden writes in and says, recently I've been thinking a lot about Metal Gear Survive. I like Metal Gear Solid games, but I was never crazy for them. I was curious, so I bought the game soon after the release, played through it solo, and had a lot of fun. Do you think this game's fate would be different if it was released today? Or if it doesn't use the Metal Gear Solid IP, or am I just crazy? Survive really falls apart later on. Like, conceptually, Survive is not the worst game in the world. And it suffers because of its attachment to Metal Gear. The contorted ways that they make that story happen, and the way that story ends, especially, just like is terrible. They are telling a terrible story. If that was removed from Metal Gear, you would just be like, well, I don't know. Okay. Yeah, sure. That's dumb, but whatever. Like it would just, no one would talk about it. No one's talking about it anyway, I guess, but here we are. Metal Gear Survive is a game about you putting up chain link fences and then poking a sharp stick through the chain link fence to kill zombies. Basically. I finished that game and I still feel dumb for doing so. Sometimes I get fixated on a bad game and just have to know. This year's version of that is the first Descendant is this year's version of Metal Gear Survive, where there was just a game where I was like, I gotta know. I gots to know. And yeah, finishing Metal Gear Survive was a terrible use of my time. Though now I can speak to it professionally and tell you, as someone who did finish that game, the story. Like, if you read about that story on Wikipedia, which I recommend doing that over playing Metal Gear Survive, it's a terrible, like, the way they reveal it, the way that they put it all together when they finally like stick you with the twist about like, here's what's really happening and you're traveling to a portal and like, oh fuck you. Fuck this, dude. What do you... Oh, God. And the way it ends up attaching to Metal Gear is very, like, forced. And it's flimsy. It's flimsy yet forced, if that makes any sense. And it's a shame because, you know, like, at the end of the day, like, Metal Gear Solid 5 was such a cool game that, like, you know, hey, we're going to take this engine and try to make something else with it. You're like, okay, yeah. Like, I'm open to it. Like, you calling it a Metal Gear thing kind of puts two strikes against it because, you know, you're doing it without Kojima. And not to say that you could not make a Metal Gear game without Kojima. A lot of people worked on those games. A lot of people contributed to the specific style of those games and the writing. And, you know, like, a lot of people weighed in on that. It's not... He did not make those games himself. All by himself. You know? And so I think you could get other people in there and have them make something that would feel authentic to Metal Gear. But what they did for Metal Gear Survive is not that. Is very much not that. So I will admit, disgustingly, I have been occasionally thinking about that game and thinking, what if I went back and played Metal Gear Survive again? Like, what if I saw, like, there's stuff in there that I just, like, what if I refamiliarized myself with Metal Gear Survive? And I was like, no, what the fuck is wrong with you? The fuck? No, god damn it. There's so many other games I could be playing to sit here and waste any cycles going like, Metal Gear Survive. Like, just, no, god damn it. I should play Metal Gear Rising again is what I should do, but hey. Let's see if we have any more emails here. Here's one. We'll keep this one anonymous. We don't really talk a lot about arcade stuff. And this is something, so I've had conversations with people about the business of rhythm games. Whether that's, you know, jazz rack licensing or the way that the makers of these games kind of try to charge for them these days is fucking crazy. So traditionally, when you buy an arcade game and it's very expensive. You know, like these days, you know, for some of these more deluxe cabinets, you might be spending like 15 grand or something. But then you put it in an arcade and you make that money back a quarter at a time or $1 at a time or whatever. And that's that. That's the exchange. That's the relationship. Rhythm games, and as more and more arcade machines have started forcing a connection to the internet, rhythm games especially has become insanely fucked up. It's fucking crazy. Okay, anyway. Anonymous email here. I work for an arcade operator, and we have some people down at IAAPA in Orlando this week. It's a trade show for the arcade industry. Bandai Namco is debuting their official North American Taiko no Tatsujin cabinets there, and they're talking numbers. Cabinet price is reasonable at $15K, but in addition to their required monthly subscription, which is the only number they're not giving out, they're also taking a rev share of 20 cents per credit, if and only if the cabinet is set to one song per credit. If more than one song per credit, meaning if you because traditionally you would put in money into a DDR machine, which is where, my touchstone here, you would put in enough for one credit and you would play potentially 3 songs in a DDR or Beatmania or what have you. Okay. If you are giving players more than one song per credit, Bandai Namco is taking 30 cents per song per credit. So 20 cents a credit was already a lot. But if you are going to give people 3 songs for 1 credit, they want 30 cents for each song. So assume a credit is $1 and you want to give people 3 songs for $1. That means they collect 90 cents of that dollar. What the fuck? On top of that, you are paying $15,000 for the cabinet, and you are paying a monthly subscription fee to them for the machine. Are you what the fuck? Okay, anyway. Now, I'm still super new to the scene, and my specialty is moving cabinets around for conventions over fixing and operations. I know Japanese music licensing is crazy to begin with, and I'm sure it's even more difficult working internationally, but tripling their cut if a cabinet is 2 songs per credit just seems absolutely nuts. Is this typical with Japanese rhythm games, or is Bandai Namco overreaching? I've heard Konami also has an egregious rev share with their Bimani games, but I didn't expect Bandai Namco to do the same. Yeah, it's fucked. So my understanding of the rhythm game scene for arcades lately is that it's been an absolute fucking shit show for years. Specifically, yes, that Konami has been, taking way too much money. Or you have some situations where cabinets are not allowed to be used in the United States to begin with. And so you end up in this weird situation where, you will have arcades, and this probably happens a lot less now because Round One is running like a legitimate business, and they would be, they would be looked down upon in their business relationships if they were to do this at their arcades. But if you're just a dude running an arcade, maybe you could get away with something. But there are situations where you have cabinets that are not allowed to be used in the United States, and so sometimes and they require an internet connection. And so you have some more enterprising people out there getting their hands on these cabinets, importing them, hacking the shit out of them. Whether that's to, in some cases, that's like, hey, we're going to pretend to be a Japanese arcade, and so we're going to use a VPN, and we're going to do this. Or just saying, hey, actually, we figured out a way to fucking, we're just going to fucking hack this machine so that it does not need the internet connection anymore, and fuck them. And keep all the money for themselves. As a consumer, do I really care where the money goes? No, no, I guess not. But this operation that they're trying to run for rhythm games here in the States, I don't think it's much better in Japan. I don't know what the business relationship is in Japan and what they charge, and so presumably it is worse here in the West. Because they feel like they can get away with it. But for a while, they weren't even trying to get away with it. They just straight up weren't allowing the machines to exist. And so you had this subculture of okay, well, we're going to hack these security dongles. We're going to modify these hard drives, whatever they needed to do to get these cabinets up and running. We're going to put it on a VPN. We're going to do, like they would jump through the hoops to make these DDR machines work. And nowadays, yeah, you got Sound Voltex, and Sound Voltex is on PC, and they're charging an insane, what is the, God, Sound Voltex Exceed Gear is something that is technically only available in Japan, but it's a Japanese version, but I think you can install it in the US. I don't think you need to be in Japan, but you are creating Japanese accounts on the e-amusement website and all of this other stuff to jump through the hoops to make Sound Voltex work on a PC. And, there are open source rhythm games out there that, you can get your hands on and do a lot of really cool shit with too. Fan games and everything that will run files exported from, and exported is maybe a nice way of saying some of the way that some of these song files are being liberated from encryption and what have you. But it seems like a really fucked up market. It has always seemed like a really fucked up market for a very long time. And so I can't say I'm like super surprised that Bandai Namco is trying to do this, but also that's just an unrealistic amount of money. The idea that that they want to take a per song thing. And so, the player ends up getting hurt by that because the charges are so severe. You're already paying a monthly subscription for the cabinet. You already had to lay out 15 grand to get it in the first place. And so you're already in the hole. And now you've got them skimming off of every single credit. And I think that's fucking scary. I don't know. That's just I don't know. At some point, only the biggest, most well-trafficked arcades will be able to get away with that because they'll make it up in volume. And it really just prevents the spread of these games, I think, to a certain degree. But not that there are that many locations left anymore. It's kind of a weird. It's a catch-22, right? Because it's like I don't have any. I don't know that there must be arcades in Los Angeles. I don't know. But I've never seen a Round One before. Yeah, there is one in LA. It looks like. I've never been to a Round One. It seems like that's if you want to find Bimani cabinets or rhythm games at all, it seems like Round One is the chain that specializes in that stuff. Looks like there's one in Burbank. Burbank, Lakewood, Santa Ana. I'm not gonna go to Santa Ana. And the City of Industry. Yeah. And one all the way out in Moreno Valley, if you're a real sicko. You're just hanging out in Rancho Cucamonga with nothing going on. You could take the drive out. Okay, someone in the chat is saying that Sound Voltex is like $10 a month and you get access to a ton of songs that way. And so it's better than you have to buy packs for some of the online Bimani, the Beatmania stuff they've done on PC. They have charged for the song packs on top of the subscription. I would really like to play Sound Voltex, and I haven't really. I've never really been able to spend any real time with it to figure out what the fuck it is, and get a sense for how it is to actually be played. I know people are, people have made their own controllers for it so they can play versions that run on a PC, or whether they're playing the official version or just kind of like fan game recreations of it. It always seemed cool. I don't know. There's the one game I don't even know what game it is. I don't know what it's called because I only see it from the perspective of if I was the cabinet. But it is a dancing game, and because I only see it on TikTok. And so it is a dancing game that just seems to have a floor that doesn't put any. It's not putting arrows on the floor. It's just it's more of a visualizer. As you're stepping on the floor, it's exploding and doing all this other stuff. Is Dance Rush Stardom in the name of that? And someone is it? I don't know. I've only seen videos of people playing it, and they just look like they're dancing. And I don't know what the fuck the video game part of it is, and what sort of. Perhaps if I went over to the Remy wiki, I would learn more about this. Okay. I just feel like, okay, this talks about the song. I feel like I need to look up a picture of the fucking cabinet and get a sense for like, okay, here we go. I'm looking at pictures of a Dance Rush Stardom cabinet. But maybe I need to see video that includes what the video game part of it is. But I don't know, it looks neat. It's cool that rhythm games have continued to like innovate and develop. But I just don't really have a good. I don't really see. I don't really see any of the newer games out there because I'm just not near an arcade. I'm not, and with the business practices for Tyco looking like they look with this rev share nightmare. Like, what operators are going to get those? What operators are going to deal with that? Or like that just sounds like such a fucking pain in the ass that you would have to charge $1 for one song in order to, to do anything. Because if you're charging, let's say you're doing $1, like two songs for $1, that means 60 cents of that dollar is going to going to the Konami. Or to Bandai Namco. I don't know. That seems fucking ridiculous, but I don't know. I've never seen a round one, and I have not been to a Dave and Buster's in like 15 years, if not more. No, in the last 10 years, I went to one Dave and Buster's. My wife was somewhere doing something, and I had some time to kill, and there was one nearby, and I walked around it. And went, just to see what they had. And then I saw what they had, and I was like, I don't want to play any of this stuff, but that's okay. That's cool. It is here. But yeah, that's a weird. It just sounds like bad business. I don't know. That's gonna do it for the show. Thanks everybody for listening. Should be here on the regular schedule this week. We'll do something on Wednesday. We'll hang out. And then Thanksgiving will happen, and then I'll be here on Black Friday to rank some 8-bit Nintendo games, barring any craziness. I will let you know if the schedule changes, but yes, yes, we will. We'll play some games. We'll play some games this week, and I don't know. They're supposed to patch S.T.A.L.K.E.R this week. The list of things that they were fixing didn't seem like bad stuff, but it didn't seem like all of it either. So they've definitely got more work to do. So probably still going to keep waiting on that one. I don't know. Have a good one. I will see you next week for another edition of this podcast.